Hi everyone, and welcome to Red Umbrella. I hope life is treating you all well. What I want to make the case for today is that American Dad can reasonably be judged the stronger show when you hold it up against Family Guy and measure them by the depth of their characters, the flavor of their humor, and the ideas they choose to explore. Both were dreamed up by Seth MacFarlane, and both found real success. Yet the two of them drifted in almost opposite directions. By digging into how each show handles character growth, story construction, emotional bonds, satire, and the consistency of its storytelling, we can start to see why so many viewers lean toward American Dad, and why that preference actually points to something worth understanding about what makes comedy hold up in long-form television. But before we get started, I gently ask you all to hit subscribe. It costs nothing, and it genuinely helps us keep improving these videos for the wonderful community we've been lucky enough to build. Alright, enough of that. Let's dig in. Origins and premises. To understand why American Dad and Family Guy grew apart so dramatically, we have to go back to the start and look at how each one was born and what each one was reaching for when it first arrived on the air. Family Guy got there first, premiering on Fox in January of 1999. It revolved around the Griffin family, who lived in the invented town of Quahog, Rhode Island. Peter Griffin was the heavy-set, none-too-clever father who earned a living at a toy factory. Lois was his patient wife, born into a wealthy family, who had walked away from that privileged life to become a homemaker and piano teacher. Meg was their anxious teenage daughter, forever desperate to be liked and accepted. Chris was their slow-witted son, who took after his father in plenty of ways. Stewie was the diabolical baby genius who wanted to murder his mother and conquer the planet, all delivered in a refined British accent, despite being an infant. And Brian was the talking dog who served as the family's voice of reason, sipping martinis and reading literature. Right from that first episode, Family Guy defined itself around the cutaway gag. These are the random scenes that break into the story whenever a character says that something reminds them of something else. Peter might drop a reference to a celebrity or a historical event, and then we'd be whisked off to a completely unrelated scene acting out that reference as a visual joke. Those cutaways became Family Guy's calling card and its most recognizable trait. The whole show was engineered to be a rapid-fire stream of jokes and pop culture nods, loosely tied together by a thin plot about the Griffins wrestling with some problem or predicament. The comedy in Family Guy was chaotic and unpredictable by design, baked into the show from its very conception. MacFarlane and his writers set out to make something that felt reckless and irreverent, something that would stand apart from the other animated sitcoms of the era. The show would leap from the main story to a cutaway about a celebrity behaving ridiculously, then back to the story, then to another cutaway about a historical figure in some absurd predicament, then back to the story once more. This structure meant Family Guy could crack a joke about anything at any time without ever worrying about whether those jokes belonged in the plot or connected to what the characters were living through. The randomness was the whole idea. The show was telling you that anything could happen and that the story was really just a pretext to pack in as many jokes as possible. Family Guy's premise centered on suburban family life rendered in an exaggerated key. The Griffins dealt with the standard sitcom troubles, like Peter losing his job, or the kids struggling at school, or the family heading off on vacation. But those troubles were merely scaffolding for the comedy, rather than the actual point of interest. The show cared far more about the cutaway jokes and the absurd scenarios than about examining what family life genuinely felt like or what it meant to be a family. This gave Family Guy a fast, anarchic energy. You never knew what was coming next, which could be thrilling for viewers who loved that kind of unpredictability and wanted to be surprised at every turn. The show's opening theme captured this attitude perfectly. The lyrics lamented how television and movies were drowning in violence and sex and wondered where the good old-fashioned values had gone. That was ironic, of course, because Family Guy itself overflowed with crude humor and inappropriate content. The show was mocking the very notion of wholesome family entertainment while pretending to yearn for it. That ironic distance from its own premise was wired into Family Guy from the beginning. American Dad arrived 6 years later, in February of 2005, airing right after the Super Bowl, one of the most watched television events of the entire year. That was an enormous promotional edge, because millions of people who might never seek out an animated comedy caught that first episode. American Dad also came from Seth MacFarlane, yet from the outset, it was built differently than Family Guy in nearly every respect. The show revolved around Stan Smith, a conservative CIA agent living in Langley Falls, Virginia. Stan was a hyper-patriotic, Reagan-worshipping, gun-obsessed character who worked for the Central Intelligence Agency and spotted threats to America wherever he turned. His wife, Francine, was a former party girl who had settled down into homemaker life and sometimes chafed against that role. His daughter, Haley, was a liberal college student who clashed relentlessly with her father's conservatism and stood at the opposite pole of the political spectrum. His son, Steve, was a nerdy teenager trying to fit in at school and sort out his identity while navigating the usual adolescent struggles. The Smith household also included two non-human members. Roger was an alien whom Stan had rescued from Area 51 years earlier and hidden in the attic to keep him safe from government experiments. Roger grew into one of the show's most vital characters thanks to his gift for inventing elaborate personas and disguises that let him leave the house and move through the world. Klaus was a German man whose brain had been implanted into a goldfish's body by the CIA as part of an experiment. These unusual family members opened the door to strange situations and science fiction elements, yet they remained characters with steady personalities and real motivations rather than mere fountains of random jokes. American Dad's premise was more politically grounded than Family Guy's from the very first episode. The show launched in 2005 during the George W. Bush presidency, at a moment when America was bitterly divided over the War on Terror, the Iraq War, and questions of patriotism and national security. Stan Smith embodied an extreme version of conservative American patriotism. He would do anything to shield America from threats, real or imagined. His CIA job meant episodes could dig into government bureaucracy, intelligence work, and political themes in ways Family Guy simply couldn't, because Family Guy was just about an ordinary suburban family with no tie to politics or government. From its first season, American Dad made a conscious decision to steer clear of the cutaway structure that defined Family Guy. The show would occasionally use flashbacks or fantasy sequences when they actually served the story or helped illuminate something about a character. But it didn't halt its plots for random, unrelated scenes that had nothing to do with what was happening. American Dad's humor grew out of the characters and their circumstances rather than out of rapid-fire pop culture references. That meant the show had to work harder to make the actual plot funny instead of leaning on distractions from it. The structural gap between the two shows was obvious to anyone who watched both. A typical Family Guy episode might build a plot around Peter launching a business or picking up a new hobby, but that plot would be interrupted 15 or 20 times by cutaways showing random celebrities or historical events or movie parodies. A typical American Dad episode would build a plot around Stan facing some trouble at work or at home, and the whole episode would stay locked on that plot from start to finish. The jokes would come from how the characters handled the situation in front of them, rather than from breaking away to show something totally unrelated. This structural difference reflected genuinely different philosophies about what comedy should be and how it ought to function. Family Guy's approach suggested comedy should spring from constant surprise and unpredictability. The show was arguing that jokes matter more than story, and that anything can be funny if it's unexpected enough. You don't need a reason for a joke to exist. You just need the joke to land in the moment. American Dad's approach suggested comedy should rise out of character and situation. The show was arguing that jokes hit harder when they make sense within the context of who these people are and what they're facing. The humor should emerge from the story rather than interrupting it. The premises also diverged sharply in how they used satire. Family Guy poked fun at suburban American life and pop culture in broad strokes. It ribbed television shows, movies, celebrities, and general cultural trends without settling on any particular theme or idea. The satire was scattershot, hitting a huge range of targets without ever developing a coherent point of view about any of them. American Dad took aim at American politics and government more specifically and more consistently. It used Stan's extreme conservatism and his CIA work to probe questions about patriotism, security, government power, and political ideology. The satire had a clearer focus, even in episodes that weren't directly about politics. The settings of the two shows also created different storytelling opportunities. Quahog was a generic suburban town that could have been anywhere in America. The show occasionally fleshed out Quahog's geography and recurring locations, like the Drunken Clam Bar where Peter drank with his friends, yet the town itself wasn't especially important to how the stories worked. It was simply a place where things happened. Langley Falls was suburban too, but the presence of CIA headquarters and the show's political themes gave the setting a sharper identity. The town felt bound up with government work and political divisions in ways that genuinely shaped how stories unfolded. The character designs in the two shows echoed their different approaches as well. Family Guy's characters had simple, rounded shapes that made them look soft and cartoonish in a very traditional way. The animation was deliberately crude in the early seasons, with stiff movements and plain backgrounds. American Dad's characters had sharper, more angular designs that lent them a slightly edgier look. Stan's square jaw and exaggerated muscular build made him resemble a cartoon action hero or a propaganda poster. Roger's alien design, with his gray skin and enormous eyes, allowed for endless costume and disguise possibilities. The visual styles matched the tones of the shows, with Family Guy looking friendlier and more conventional, while American Dad looked a touch more distinctive and stylized. The voice work established different tones for each show, too. Seth MacFarlane voiced both Peter Griffin and Stan Smith, yet he used completely different voices and performances for them. Peter sounded goofy and childish, with a thick Rhode Island accent and a habit of giggling at his own jokes. Stan sounded authoritative and intense, with a more generic American accent and a serious tone. These vocal choices reinforced the different personalities and the different kinds of stories each show would tell. Peter was clearly a comedy figure the instant he opened his mouth. Stan could be funny, yet he also felt like someone who could shoulder more serious storylines. The writers' rooms for the two shows overlapped somewhat, yet they developed distinct cultures and approaches to building episodes. Family Guy's writers concentrated on generating as many jokes as possible and squeezing them into episodes however they could. The goal was joke density and surprise. American Dad's writers concentrated more on story structure and character consistency. That didn't mean American Dad had fewer jokes, but it meant the jokes had to serve the story, rather than the story serving as an excuse for jokes. Network expectations for the shows also differed in meaningful ways. Family Guy had already been canceled once after 3 seasons, and then revived in 2005 thanks to strong DVD sales and cable ratings, which gave it a certain license to be weird and experimental. It had already proven it could survive cancellation. American Dad launched with massive promotional muscle after the Super Bowl, which created pressure to succeed right away and pull in a large audience, but that pressure also brought resources and attention. American Dad had to prove itself quickly, which may have pushed the writers to concentrate on making coherent, engaging episodes, rather than simply trying to be as random as possible. The timing of each premiere mattered as well in terms of the television landscape. Family Guy launched in 1999, when adult animation was still uncommon on network television. The Simpsons was the main point of reference, and Family Guy positioned itself as edgier and more chaotic than The Simpsons. American Dad launched in 2005, when adult animation had become far more established and accepted. Family Guy had already been revived and was thriving. South Park had been on for years. American Dad couldn't simply be random and edgy, because that territory was already claimed. It had to distinguish itself by being more focused and narrative-driven. From their very origins, these two shows set out on different roads that would grow ever more pronounced over time. Family Guy defined itself as a show about delivering maximum jokes through cutaways and randomness. American Dad defined itself as a show about exploring characters and political themes through more traditional storytelling. Both approaches could work, and both shows found audiences who valued what they were doing. Understanding these foundational differences helps explain why the shows developed such distinct identities despite coming from the same creator and living on the same network. Before we move on, be sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. These different structural foundations would have the biggest impact of all on how each show built its characters and shaped its humor around them. Section 2. Character-driven focus versus random humor. The most fundamental gap between American Dad and Family Guy lies in how each show manufactures humor and where that humor originates. This gap shapes everything about how the shows feel to watch and how viewers relate to the characters over time. Family Guy generates humor through randomness, surprise, and constant interruption. American Dad generates humor through character consistency, situation, and letting plots develop naturally without distraction. These opposing methods create utterly different viewing experiences, even though both shows are animated sitcoms from the same creator airing on the same network. Family Guy's approach to humor rests on the cutaway gag, which we discussed in the previous section, but the impact of that approach runs deeper than mere structure or pacing. When a show endlessly interrupts its own story to display random, unrelated scenes, it's telling viewers that the story doesn't really matter to the overall experience. What matters is the next joke. The characters become vessels for delivering references and gags rather than people we're meant to care about or understand as individuals. This has clear upsides. It means the show can be funny even when the plot is thin or half-baked. It means viewers who catch the references feel rewarded for their pop culture knowledge. It creates a fast, restless energy that can be exciting and engaging, but it also carries serious downsides that grow more apparent the longer you watch. When characters exist mainly to set up jokes, they never develop depth or consistency over time. Peter Griffin in Season 1 and Peter Griffin in Season 15 are essentially the same character despite 14 years passing. He hasn't grown or changed because growth and change aren't what the show cares about exploring. Peter exists to do stupid things that create openings for cutaway gags and absurd scenarios. His personality serves that function and nothing else. He's a joke machine rather than a character. The cutaway structure also means Family Guy can be funny in isolated moments without those moments adding up to anything meaningful or satisfying. You might laugh at a cutaway about a celebrity doing something ridiculous, yet that laugh is severed from the story you were just watching. The joke works on its own, but it does nothing to deepen your understanding of the characters or make the overall episode more satisfying as a complete experience. The result is a viewing experience that feels fragmented and disjointed. You're watching a collection of funny bits rather than a coherent story that happens to be funny. American Dad deliberately rejected the cutaway structure and instead built its humor out of character and situation. That means jokes in American Dad come from who these people are and what they're wrestling with, rather than from random interruptions. When Stan does something funny, it's funny because it's something Stan would actually do given his established personality and worldview. When Roger constructs an elaborate persona, it's funny because we know Roger and understand why he's doing this and what he's after. The humor is woven into the story rather than separated from it. This character-driven approach delivers several advantages that compound over time. First, it makes the characters feel more real and consistent as people, rather than as cartoon constructs. Stan Smith has recognizable traits that persist across episodes and seasons. He's intensely patriotic to an extreme degree. He's paranoid about threats to America. He loves his family, yet struggles to express emotions in healthy ways. He's physically capable and trained as an agent, yet emotionally stunted. These traits produce natural comedy because they steer Stan into conflicts and misunderstandings that feel inevitable given who he is. We laugh at Stan while also understanding him as a character with motivations. Second, character-driven humor allows for growth and development over time in ways that make long-term viewing more rewarding. Stan in Season 1 shares his core traits and basic personality with Stan in Season 15. Yet, he has learned things and changed in small but noticeable ways. His relationship with Haley has evolved as he's come to respect her views, even when he disagrees. His marriage to Francine has deepened as they've faced challenges together. He's grown slightly more aware of his own flaws, even if he can't fully overcome them. This growth makes longtime viewers feel rewarded for their investment in following these characters. Third, humor that grows out of character and situation tends to be more emotionally satisfying than random humor because it feels earned. When something funny happens because of who a character is, we understand why it's funny. The comedy has logic to it. When Roger's vanity drags him into trouble, we laugh because we know Roger is vain and self-absorbed, and we can trace how that trait created this specific problem. The laugh feels earned rather than arbitrary. We're not just laughing at a joke. We're laughing at how this particular character produced this particular situation. American Dad builds humor out of character relationships in ways Family Guy largely doesn't even attempt. Stan and Francine have a genuine marriage the show explores seriously at times. They clash based on their different personalities and needs. Stan is rigid and controlling and craves structure. Francine is more free-spirited and wants excitement and spontaneity. These differences create comedy when they collide, yet they also create authentic emotional moments when the characters work through their problems and reconnect. The show can be funny about the relationship while also making you care whether they stay together. Stan and Haley's relationship generates comedy through political conflict and generational friction. Stan is deeply conservative and sees the world in black and white. Haley is deeply liberal and questions authority and tradition. They argue about politics constantly, yet beneath the arguments lies real love between father and daughter. Episodes can examine how political differences strain family relationships while still being funny about those differences. The humor comes from characters holding strong beliefs that clash rather than from random political jokes dropped into the episode. Steve's storylines often center on his struggles with adolescence and his hunger to be popular and successful with girls. These are classic sitcom setups many shows have done, yet American Dad makes them work by keeping Steve consistent and letting him fail in ways that feel real for an awkward teenager. His friendship with his nerdy friends Barry, Snot, and Toshi creates ongoing comedy because those characters have established dynamics. We know how they'll react to situations because we know who they are and what they care about. Roger is American Dad's most versatile character because his alien nature lets him take on different personas and identities without explanation. Yet even Roger's personas follow patterns that trace back to his core self. Roger is vain, selfish, dramatic, and often cruel. His personas amplify those traits in different ways. When Roger invents a new character, we're laughing at how Roger's personality manifests in this new disguise. The humor is about Roger as much as it's about the specific persona, which keeps his stories tied to the show rather than feeling like random sketches. Klaus offers a different flavor of humor as a character who is permanently frustrated and powerless, a human consciousness trapped in a fish's body by a CIA experiment. He can't do much physically because he's a goldfish. The family often forgets he's even there. His bitterness and his futile attempts to be taken seriously produce comedy that flows entirely from his situation and his personality. Klaus works as a character because his limitations are consistent and the show mines them for humor rather than just having him spout random jokes. Family Guy's characters, by contrast, function mainly as joke delivery systems rather than as fully realized people. Peter exists to be stupid in ways that tee up cutaways and absurd situations. Lois exists to be the straight man who reacts to Peter's stupidity and tries to hold on to some sanity. Meg exists to be abused and mocked by everyone around her. Chris exists to be dumb like his father. Stewie began as an evil genius baby, yet became a character whose main trait is being possibly gay and having an ambiguous relationship with Brian. Brian became a mouthpiece for Seth MacFarlane's political opinions. These characters have traits, yet those traits don't produce the kind of rich, character-based comedy American Dad generates. The difference becomes especially clear when you compare how the shows handle recurring situations. In Family Guy, if Peter loses his job, the episode will be about whatever random adventure spins out of that premise, and the following week, Peter will have his job back with no explanation or consequences. The show resets because continuity doesn't matter to what Family Guy is trying to do. In American Dad, if Stan faces a problem at work, the episode explores that problem through Stan's character. His paranoia, or his ego, or his rigid thinking makes the problem worse in specific ways. The resolution feels like it came from Stan learning something or making a choice rather than just happening at random. American Dad also uses physical comedy in ways that connect to character. Stan is physically capable as a trained CIA agent, so when he lands in action sequences, they showcase his skills while also being funny. Steve is awkward and unathletic, so his attempts at sports or physical activity fail in ways specific to his clumsiness. Roger can change his appearance at will, so physical comedy with Roger often involves disguises falling apart or his vanity leading to physical consequences. The physical humor serves character rather than being random slapstick. Family Guy uses physical comedy more randomly, disconnected from character. Peter gets hurt in exaggerated ways that don't really tie to who he is beyond being an idiot. Characters engage in extended fight sequences that exist purely for spectacle rather than serving any character purpose. The most famous example is Peter's ongoing brawls with a giant chicken, elaborate and violent sequences that happen because the show finds them funny rather than because they mean anything about Peter or the story being told. The pacing of humor in the two shows also reflects this fundamental difference. Family Guy fires jokes at a rapid clip because cutaways allow for endless new setups without needing transitions. You might get 10 or 15 jokes in a 3-minute span because the show keeps cutting away to new scenarios. American Dad delivers jokes at a more measured pace because the humor has to grow out of the ongoing story. You might get fewer jokes per minute, yet the ones that land feel more substantial because they're bound to what's happening and why we care. This difference shapes the whole feel of watching each show. Family Guy feels frenetic and chaotic, your attention yanked in new directions constantly. That can be entertaining, yet it can also become exhausting over long stretches. American Dad feels more relaxed and focused. You can follow the story without being constantly interrupted, which creates a calmer viewing experience that works better for long-form watching or binge-watching multiple episodes. The character focus in American Dad also opens the door to emotional payoffs Family Guy generally avoids or undercuts. When an American Dad episode builds toward a moment where Stan admits he was wrong, or where Francine and Stan reconcile after a fight, that moment carries weight because we've followed these characters through the story. We care about the outcome because the show has made us invested in these people. Family Guy occasionally reaches for emotional moments, yet they often fall flat because the show hasn't earned them through character development, or because it immediately undercuts them with a joke. Before we move on, be sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. The character-driven focus in American Dad doesn't just shape individual episodes, it shapes how the show handles family relationships and emotional depth across its entire run. Section 3. Family relationships and depth. The way a show handles family relationships reveals what it values and what kind of emotional experience it wants to create. American Dad and Family Guy come at family relationships from fundamentally different angles that reflect their different priorities. American Dad treats the Smith family as real people with genuine relationships that develop over time. Family Guy treats the Griffin family as comedy constructs whose relationships exist to tee up jokes. These different approaches produce vastly different viewing experiences and shape how much viewers can invest in the characters emotionally. American Dad builds its stories on the idea that the Smith family genuinely cares about each other despite their differences and conflicts. Stan loves Francine even when they fight. Francine loves Stan even when he frustrates her with his rigidity and paranoia. Stan and Haley argue endlessly about politics and values, yet both would do anything to protect the other. Steve looks up to his father and craves his approval even when Stan disappoints him. This bedrock of genuine family love lets the show explore conflicts and problems while keeping the emotional stakes real. We care whether these relationships survive because the show has convinced us these people matter to each other. Stan and Francine's marriage sits at the emotional center of American Dad in many ways. The show explores their relationship seriously across many episodes. They have real conflicts about control and spontaneity. Stan wants everything planned and organized. Francine wants excitement and unpredictability. These differences create ongoing tension that feels real. Episodes show them fighting over these differences, yet the fights arise from recognizable relationship dynamics rather than from random plot devices. The show also examines how Stan and Francine keep their marriage alive over time. They've been together for years, with routines and patterns. Francine sometimes feels bored or trapped by suburban housewife life. Stan sometimes takes Francine for granted. These are real marriage problems that many viewers recognize. When episodes address them, they do so with both humor and genuine emotional weight. The resolution usually involves Stan and Francine reconnecting and remembering why they chose each other, and those resolutions feel earned because the show takes time to develop the conflict. Episodes like Widowmaker explore what would happen if Stan and Francine's relationship ended. In it, Stan fakes his death to dodge trouble at work. Francine believes he's actually dead and begins moving on with her life. The episode examines how Francine would cope without Stan and what he means to her daily existence. That kind of exploration requires the show to take the relationship seriously. The humor comes from the situation, yet the emotional core is genuine. Stan and Haley's relationship offers a different kind of depth through their political conflicts. Stan is deeply conservative. Haley is deeply liberal. They stand at opposite ends of the American political spectrum, yet the show uses this conflict to examine how families stay together despite fundamental disagreements. Stan and Haley love each other, even when they disagree about everything. Episodes show them arguing passionately about politics, yet the arguments come from a place of caring. They argue because they want to convince each other, which shows they value each other's opinions even when they think those opinions are wrong. The show also explores how Stan struggles with having a daughter who rejects everything he believes in. Stan's identity is bound up in his conservative values and his patriotism, so Haley's rejection of them feels personal. He worries he failed as a father because Haley didn't adopt his worldview. Episodes probe this insecurity in ways that make Stan more sympathetic. We understand why he keeps trying to change Haley's mind, even when it's plainly not working. Haley, for her part, struggles with having a father who represents everything she opposes politically. She loves Stan, yet finds his views harmful and wrong. The show examines how hard it is to love someone whose beliefs you find reprehensible, a real tension many families experience in politically divided America. American Dad addresses it through comedy, while acknowledging the genuine difficulty of the situation. Stan and Steve's relationship explores father-son dynamics and Stan's assumptions about masculinity. Stan is a hyper-masculine action hero type. Steve is a nerdy, unathletic kid who loves theater and singing. Stan struggles with having a son who doesn't match his idea of what a son should be. Episodes explore how Stan tries to make Steve more traditionally masculine, and how Steve tries to win his father's approval while staying true to himself. This conflict produces both comedy and genuine emotion. The show lets Stan grow in his acceptance of Steve over time. Early episodes show Stan constantly disappointed in Steve. Later episodes show Stan learning to appreciate Steve's actual talents and interests, rather than forcing Steve to be someone he's not. This growth unfolds slowly and feels realistic. Stan still has moments of wanting Steve to be more traditionally masculine, yet he's gotten better at accepting who Steve actually is. Steve's hunger for his father's approval drives many of his storylines. He wants Stan to be proud of him and tries different approaches to impress him, sometimes reaching for athletic toughness, sometimes trying to show Stan that being smart and creative has value. The show treats Steve's desire for approval seriously, rather than just mining it for jokes. We understand why Steve cares so much about what Stan thinks. Francine's relationships with her children also receive development and attention. She's protective of both Haley and Steve in different ways. With Haley, Francine tries to be supportive while also tempering some of Haley's more extreme positions. With Steve, Francine is nurturing, yet also encourages him to be more confident. She often acts as a mediator between Stan and the kids when conflicts flare, and the show takes her role as the family's emotional center seriously. It also explores how Francine has her own identity and desires beyond being a wife and mother. Episodes show her pursuing interests and grappling with her own frustrations. She's not just a supporting player in Stan's stories. She has her own storylines about friendship and personal fulfillment and discovering who she is outside her family roles, which makes her feel like a complete character rather than a wife archetype. Roger's relationship with the family creates a different dynamic. Roger is selfish and often terrible to the Smiths. He uses them for his own ends and creates problems for them constantly. Yet the family keeps him around and genuinely cares about him. The show explores why they tolerate Roger despite his behavior. Part of it is that Stan feels responsible for him after rescuing him from Area 51. Part of it is that Roger, for all his flaws, has become part of the family. Episodes show him occasionally doing genuinely kind things for the Smiths that reveal he cares about them in his own dysfunctional way. Klaus's isolation from the family creates comedy, yet also poignancy. He's trapped in a fishbowl, watching the family live their lives without really including him. Episodes occasionally explore how lonely this is for Klaus. He was once human, with a full life, and now he's a goldfish most of the family barely notices. When the show addresses this seriously, it stirs genuine sympathy for Klaus, despite him being a minor character. Family Guy handles family relationships in a completely different manner. The Griffins are frequently antagonistic toward each other in ways that don't feel like real family dynamics. Peter is often cruel to Meg for no reason beyond the show finding it funny. The entire family joins in mocking and abusing Meg. This abuse is meant to be comedy, yet it's relentless and mean-spirited in ways that make it uncomfortable to watch. Meg hasn't done anything to deserve the treatment she gets. The family is just cruel to her because that's her role in the show. Peter and Lois's relationship lacks the depth Stan and Francine's has. They've been married for years, yet the show rarely explores what keeps them together or what their relationship actually means to them. Peter treats Lois badly in many episodes. He's selfish and inconsiderate. He ignores her needs. He makes decisions that hurt the family without consulting her. Lois tolerates all this without meaningful consequences. The show resets each episode, so nothing Peter does affects their relationship long term. Episodes occasionally attempt something sincere with Peter and Lois, yet those moments feel inconsistent with how the show usually treats them. One episode might show them harboring genuine romantic feelings, and the next will show Peter doing something terrible to Lois with no memory of any previous relationship development. The lack of continuity makes it impossible to invest in their relationship emotionally. Peter's relationship with his children is similarly shallow. He's often a bad father in ways that are supposed to be funny, yet just come across as neglectful or cruel. He forgets his kids' needs. He uses them for his own purposes. He puts them in danger through his stupidity. The show doesn't explore what it means to have a father like Peter, or how the kids cope with his behavior. They just react to whatever the current episode requires. Chris and Meg's relationships with their parents rarely get serious attention. They exist as supporting players in Peter's storylines rather than as people with their own emotional lives. When the show attempts character-focused episodes about Chris or Meg, they often feel disconnected from the rest of the series because the show hasn't built these characters up enough to make us care about their individual journeys. Brian's role in the family is also unclear and inconsistent. Sometimes he's Peter's best friend, sometimes the voice of reason trying to stop Peter's dumb plans, sometimes barely involved with the family at all. His relationship with the Griffins shifts based on what the episode needs rather than following any consistent pattern, making it hard to understand what he means to the family or what they mean to him. Stewie's relationship with the family is perhaps the most inconsistent of all. He started as a baby who wanted to kill Lois and conquer the world. The show largely abandoned that premise without explanation. Now Stewie is just a baby who is possibly gay and has adventures with Brian. His relationship with Lois shifted from homicidal to normal without the show ever addressing why. The family sometimes understands what Stewie says and sometimes doesn't, with no consistency about when they can hear him. The fundamental difference is that American Dad treats family relationships as important elements deserving development and consistency, while Family Guy treats them as frameworks for jokes that can be reset whenever convenient. American Dad asks viewers to care whether these people can work through their conflicts and stay together. Family Guy asks viewers to laugh at family dysfunction without worrying about consequences or emotional reality. This shapes how satisfying each show feels over time. American Dad episodes can have emotional payoffs because the show has built up relationships we care about. When Stan and Francine reconcile after a fight, it matters because we've watched them struggle and we want them to succeed. When Stan accepts something about Steve, it matters because we've followed Stan's journey toward that acceptance. Family Guy episodes rarely land emotional payoffs because the show hasn't earned them. When Peter and Lois share a touching moment, it feels random because the show hasn't built toward it. The depth of family relationships in American Dad also opens the door to different kinds of stories. The show can do episodes about family therapy, or family vacations, or family conflicts that feel substantive, because the family dynamics are well established. Family Guy can attempt the same types of episodes, yet they feel hollow because the relationships aren't developed enough to support serious exploration. American Dad proves that animated sitcoms can carry genuine emotional depth without sacrificing comedy. The show is funny while also making you care about these characters and their relationships. That blend of humor and heart creates a more satisfying experience than pure comedy without emotional stakes. Family Guy chose to prioritize jokes over emotional development, which makes it less engaging for viewers who want characters they can invest in. Before we move on, be sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. The difference in how these shows approach family relationships connects directly to their fundamentally different styles of humor and what each show is trying to accomplish through comedy. Section 4. Humor Style, Satire versus Absurdity. The type of humor a show uses shapes the entire viewing experience and determines what kind of audience it will attract. American Dad and Family Guy represent two fundamentally different approaches to comedy that reflect different goals and different beliefs about what makes things funny. American Dad builds its humor primarily through satire of politics, society, and bureaucracy. Family Guy builds its humor primarily through absurdity, non sequiturs, shock value, and pop culture parody. These different approaches produce shows that feel completely different despite sharing a creator and a network. Understanding why each show chose its particular style helps explain the different audiences they attract and the different reputations they hold among viewers and critics. Satire is humor that uses exaggeration and irony to criticize or comment on something real in the world. When American Dad reaches for satire, it usually targets specific aspects of American politics, government, or social attitudes that genuinely exist. The show takes something real and pushes it to extremes to expose what's wrong or absurd about it. Stan Smith is a satirical character because he represents real conservative American attitudes taken to their logical extreme. His paranoia about threats to America satirizes how fear is used in American politics to motivate people and justify policies. His blind patriotism satirizes nationalism and unquestioning support for government actions. His willingness to trample civil liberties in the name of security satirizes the post-9/11 expansion of government surveillance and power. Everything about Stan reflects real attitudes that exist, just amplified to make the problems with those attitudes more visible. The satire works because it's rooted in recognizable reality. American politics really is split between extreme positions that seem unable to find common ground. The CIA really does engage in questionable activities that raise ethical concerns about government power. Conservative Americans really do sometimes prioritize patriotism and security over other values, like privacy and civil liberties. American Dad takes these real elements and pushes them further for comedic effect. The humor comes from recognition. We laugh because we recognize the kernel of truth in the exaggeration. When Stan does something absurdly patriotic, we laugh because we've seen milder versions of that same attitude in real life. We might know people who think like Stan, or we've watched politicians use similar rhetoric, or we've encountered communities where Stan's worldview is common and accepted. Episodes like Stan of Arabia demonstrate American Dad's satirical approach clearly. In it, Stan moves his family to Saudi Arabia for a CIA assignment. The episode satirizes both American attitudes toward the Middle East and actual conditions in conservative Islamic countries. Stan loves Saudi Arabia at first because it aligns with his conservative values about traditional gender roles and religious authority. He appreciates that women are required to cover themselves and that religious law governs daily life. He sees these restrictions as positive because they enforce the kind of traditional values he believes in. The satire works on multiple levels, mocking both Stan's conservatism and the actual oppressive conditions the episode depicts. The humor comes from revealing contradictions and forcing characters to confront their own beliefs. Stan realizes that the extreme version of his values isn't actually what he wants once he sees how those values function in practice. When his wife Francine suffers under the restrictions, Stan has to admit that maybe extreme enforcement of traditional values creates suffering rather than stability. American Dad also satirizes government bureaucracy and intelligence agencies through Stan's work at the CIA. Episodes show the CIA being incompetent, wasteful, and focused on the wrong priorities. The agents care more about office politics and personal advancement than actual national security. They squander resources on pointless projects that serve no real purpose. They create new problems while trying to solve others. The satire is pointed because it's grounded in real criticisms of how intelligence agencies work. The show uses Stan's job to examine questions about government surveillance, secret operations, and whether national security justifies questionable actions. These are real debates in American society, and American Dad uses comedy to probe them from different angles. The show presents the CIA as an organization that believes it's protecting America while often doing the opposite through incompetence or misguided priorities. The political satire in American Dad goes beyond simply mocking politicians or positions. The show satirizes political culture and how politics affects ordinary people in their daily lives. Stan and Haley's conflicts satirize how political polarization damages family relationships and drives wedges between people who should be united by love. Episodes about elections satirize how campaigns manipulate voters through emotional appeals and how people make political choices based on tribalism rather than rational policy evaluation. Episodes about government programs satirize how bureaucracy creates absurd situations that hurt the very people the programs are meant to help. The satire is embedded in the world of the show rather than delivered through random references that interrupt the narrative. American Dad's satirical approach allows for humor with layers and depth. A joke about Stan's paranoia is funny on its surface because Stan is overreacting to something harmless. You can laugh at Stan being ridiculous without thinking about anything deeper. Yet the joke is also commenting on how fear is manufactured and exploited in American political discourse. Politicians and media outlets use fear to motivate voters and viewers, encouraging people to see threats everywhere, even when those threats are exaggerated or imaginary. Stan's paranoia is an amplified version of how many Americans are encouraged to view the world through a lens of constant threat. Viewers can enjoy the surface joke without engaging with the deeper satirical point, or they can appreciate both layers of meaning. This layered humor makes American Dad more rewarding for viewers who pay attention to what the show is actually saying beneath the comedy. The show also satirizes social attitudes and cultural norms beyond just politics. Episodes satirize consumerism and how advertising manipulates people into buying things they don't need by creating artificial desires. Episodes satirize suburban life and the pressure to conform to certain standards of success, appearance, and behavior. Episodes satirize masculinity and how men are expected to behave certain ways to be considered properly masculine, even when those expectations are harmful or limiting. Episodes satirize organized religion and how religious institutions sometimes contradict the values they claim to promote. The satire is usually specific rather than vague. The show identifies particular contradictions or absurdities in how society functions and builds comedy around exposing them to the audience. Family Guy takes a completely different route, leaning on absurdity and randomness rather than satire or social commentary. Absurdist humor is comedy that embraces illogical situations and nonsense without trying to make a point about reality. Things happen in Family Guy that make no sense and have no connection to how the world actually works. A character might suddenly turn into something else for no reason at all. Impossible events might occur without explanation or acknowledgement. The laws of physics might stop applying whenever it's convenient for a joke. The show's universe has no consistent rules, which means anything can happen at any time purely for comedic effect. This creates an anything-goes atmosphere, where the only rule is that there are no rules limiting what can happen. The cutaway gags that define Family Guy are fundamentally absurdist in their construction and purpose. Peter will reference something, and we'll see a random scene that usually has nothing to do with the actual plot or the situation the characters are in. These scenes don't need to make logical sense or connect to anything meaningful. They exist purely as isolated jokes. A cutaway might show a historical figure doing something anachronistic they never did in real life, or a celebrity in an embarrassing situation that never happened. The humor comes from the randomness and unexpectedness, rather than from any social commentary or deeper meaning. Family Guy is arguing that humor doesn't need justification or context to be funny. Anything can be funny if it's presented in a funny way and catches you off guard. Family Guy also leans heavily on shock value humor. The show will do or say things specifically because they're offensive or transgressive. The goal is to push boundaries and see how far the show can go before the network stops it or before audiences reject it. This can be funny, yet it's a very different kind of funny than satire. Shock humor is about breaking taboos and making people uncomfortable on purpose. The laugh comes from the audacity of saying or showing something most shows wouldn't attempt. Satirical humor is about revealing truths and contradictions in society. The laugh comes from recognition and insight into how things actually work. Shock humor asks, "Can you believe we're doing this?" Satirical humor says, "Look at what this reveals about reality." These are fundamentally different goals. Pop culture parody is another major element of Family Guy's humor. The show constantly references movies, television shows, celebrities, and other media viewers might recognize. Episodes will parody specific films or recreate famous scenes from television history, with the Griffin family playing the roles. Sometimes entire episodes are structured as parodies of particular movies or shows. These parodies work for viewers who recognize the references. If you've seen the movie or show being parodied, you can appreciate how Family Guy is recreating or twisting it for comedic effect. If you haven't seen the reference, the joke doesn't work as well, or might not work at all. This makes Family Guy's humor dependent on pop culture knowledge in ways American Dad's humor isn't. You need to have watched a great deal of television and film to catch all of Family Guy's jokes and references. The non sequitur is central to how Family Guy builds jokes throughout each episode. A non sequitur is something that doesn't follow logically from what came before. Family Guy uses them constantly through its cutaway structure. The show will be in the middle of a scene about one thing, then suddenly cut to something completely unrelated, then cut back to the original scene as if the interruption never happened. This creates a chaotic, unpredictable feel where you never know what's coming next. The humor comes from the shock of sudden transitions and unexpected content appearing without warning. The randomness itself becomes part of what many viewers find funny. This absurdist approach lets Family Guy be very funny in individual moments. A well-executed cutaway gag can be hilarious. A shocking joke can make you laugh from pure surprise. A pop culture parody can be entertaining if it's done cleverly. The problem is that absurdist humor doesn't accumulate meaning over time the way satirical humor does. Each joke exists in isolation from the others. You laugh or you don't, yet the joke doesn't contribute to any larger point the show is making about society or human nature. The episode as a whole doesn't add up to anything beyond the sum of its individual jokes. When the episode ends, you've experienced a series of funny moments without gaining any insight into characters, society, or anything meaningful beyond those isolated laughs. Family Guy's humor also tends to punch down more than American Dad's. Punching down means making jokes at the expense of people or groups who have less power or are already marginalized. Family Guy frequently makes jokes about disabled people, minorities, and other groups in ways that feel mean-spirited rather than satirical or insightful. The show will sometimes defend these jokes by claiming it makes fun of everyone equally, yet making fun of everyone equally still means making fun of people who are already struggling or facing discrimination. American Dad's satirical humor tends to punch up, targeting people and institutions with power. It mocks government agencies, political ideologies, and social systems rather than vulnerable individuals. When American Dad makes jokes about marginalized groups, it usually frames those jokes as satirizing how society treats those groups rather than mocking the groups themselves. The joke is about the prejudice and the system, not about the people experiencing it. The tone each show's humor creates shapes the overall experience significantly. American Dad's satirical humor creates a tone that feels intelligent and purposeful. The show seems to have opinions about the world and uses comedy to express them thoughtfully. Family Guy's absurdist humor creates a tone that feels chaotic and meaningless. The show doesn't seem to have any particular point of view beyond let's make as many jokes as possible. Before we move on, be sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. The contrast between satire and absurdity extends beyond individual jokes to affect how each show approaches narrative consistency and whether episodes build on each other or exist in isolation. Section 5. Narrative consistency. One of the most significant differences between American Dad and Family Guy is how each handles continuity and whether events from one episode carry into future episodes. Narrative consistency is about whether a show maintains a coherent world where actions have consequences and where character development persists over time. American Dad maintains relatively strong narrative consistency, where events matter and build on each other. Family Guy largely abandons narrative consistency in favor of episodic reset, where each episode exists in isolation. These different approaches to continuity produce very different viewing experiences and shape how deeply audiences can invest in the characters and their stories. American Dad treats its episodes as existing within a continuous timeline where things that happen have lasting effects. When a major event occurs in an American Dad episode, it's usually acknowledged in future episodes. Characters remember what happened. Relationships change based on experiences. The world of the show evolves rather than remaining frozen. This continuity creates a sense that the Smith family is living an ongoing life rather than existing as props for isolated comedy scenarios. Viewers who watch regularly are rewarded with callbacks to earlier episodes and with character development that accumulates over many seasons. One clear example is how the show handles Roger's personas and disguises. Roger creates elaborate characters and lives entire lives as these personas, and the show keeps track of many of them, bringing them back in later episodes. When Roger creates a persona named Ricky Spanish, who is hated by everyone in town for being terrible, that persona returns in multiple later episodes. People remember Ricky Spanish and react to him based on past events. The show maintains continuity about which personas exist and what happened when Roger used them, creating a richer world where actions have consequences that persist. The show has built an entire mythology around Roger's various identities, and viewers who pay attention can track which personas have appeared and how they connect. Stan and Francine's marriage also demonstrates American Dad's approach to continuity. The show explores their relationship across many episodes and lets it develop and change. When they have a major fight or face a serious challenge, the resolution of that conflict shapes how they interact in future episodes. The show remembers what they've been through together. Their marriage feels like it has history and depth because the show maintains continuity about their experiences. You can watch them grow and adapt as a couple over many seasons, rather than resetting to a default state after each episode. Episodes about their relationship reference past conflicts and past resolutions, showing that their shared history matters. The show also maintains continuity about major life events. When Haley marries Jeff Fisher, that marriage becomes an ongoing part of the show. Jeff becomes a regular character appearing in many episodes. The show explores what it means for Stan to have a son-in-law and how that relationship develops over time. When major changes happen to the family's living situation or circumstances, those changes persist and become part of the show's ongoing reality. The continuity makes the world feel real and makes viewers feel like they're following these characters through actual experiences that shape who they are. American Dad's continuity extends to supporting characters and locations as well. The show has developed a consistent cast of recurring characters who appear regularly and whose relationships with the Smiths evolve. Characters like Stan's CIA co-workers or Steve's group of nerdy friends have consistent personalities and histories. When they appear, they bring their established traits and past experiences with them. The show remembers who these people are and what they mean to the main characters, creating a sense of community and making Langley Falls feel like a real place with real people living in it. The consistency of supporting characters helps build a world that feels lived in rather than artificial. The continuity also allows for long-term storytelling and character arcs that span multiple seasons. Stan's relationship with his father has been explored across many episodes over many years. Each episode dealing with Stan's father builds on previous ones and adds new layers to their complicated relationship. Viewers who have watched from the start can appreciate how Stan's understanding of his father has evolved and how that evolution has shaped who Stan is. This kind of long-term development is only possible when a show maintains narrative consistency, and the payoff of these long arcs rewards viewers who stay with the show. Family Guy takes the opposite approach, largely abandoning narrative consistency in favor of episodic storytelling where each episode resets. Events that happen in one episode usually have no effect on future ones. Characters don't remember major events. Relationships don't change based on experiences. The show exists in a perpetual present where nothing has lasting consequences. This gives Family Guy maximum flexibility to tell whatever story it wants in any episode without worrying about continuity. Yet, it also means nothing that happens really matters in any lasting way. The reset button gets pressed constantly. The most obvious example is how the show handles character deaths. Multiple episodes have shown major characters dying, yet those characters return in the next episode with no explanation. Brian the dog was killed in one episode in a seemingly permanent way, yet he was brought back to life 3 episodes later through time travel. The show made a big deal of Brian's death when it happened, generating real emotional reactions from viewers who thought it was a permanent change, yet it undid that death quickly and never really addressed the implications. This demonstrated that even major events like a main character dying carry no permanent consequences in Family Guy's universe. Nothing is truly permanent because everything can be reset. The Griffin family relationships also reset constantly rather than developing over time. Peter and Lois might have a major fight or reconciliation in one episode, yet the next will show them back in their default dynamic as if nothing happened. The show doesn't track how their experiences should be shaping their marriage. Meg might have a breakthrough or an important development in one episode, yet she'll be back to being the family punching bag in the next, with no acknowledgement of her previous growth. The characters exist in a loop where they never really change or learn from their experiences, creating a sense of stagnation where nothing meaningful can happen because everything gets erased. Family Guy's lack of continuity extends to the show's entire world and setting. major events can happen that should fundamentally change Quahog or the Griffin's circumstances, yet everything is back to normal by the next episode. The Griffin's house might be destroyed in one episode and fully rebuilt without explanation by the next. Peter might lose his job or gain a fortune, yet his employment and finances will reset to normal. The show makes no effort to maintain consistency about the state of its world from episode to episode. Buildings that are destroyed reappear. Relationships that are severed are whole again. Nothing that happens has any permanence. This episodic approach does grant Family Guy certain advantages. The writers can tell any story they want without worrying about whether it fits previous episodes. They can reset everything whenever convenient and start fresh each episode. They can experiment with different versions of characters without committing to any particular direction. This flexibility allows for creativity in individual episodes, yet it comes at the cost of making the show feel less substantial overall. The freedom to reset everything means nothing ever matters enough to be worth remembering. The different approaches to continuity also shape how the shows handle character development. American Dad lets its characters grow and change gradually over many seasons. Stan becomes slightly more accepting of Haley's views over time. Steve becomes more confident as he grows up. Francine discovers more about who she is beyond being a wife and mother. These changes happen slowly and feel earned because the show maintains continuity about character experiences. Viewers who watch across many seasons can see the characters evolving in meaningful ways. The growth accumulates and rewards long-term viewers. Family Guy's characters don't really develop because the show resets their personalities constantly. Peter might learn a lesson at the end of an episode, yet he'll have forgotten it entirely by the next. The characters can't grow because growth requires continuity. You need to remember where a character started in order to see how far they've come. Family Guy's episodic structure keeps characters stuck in loops, repeating the same patterns and making the same mistakes over and over without progressing, which frustrates viewers who want to see characters change. The continuity difference shapes how rewarding each show is for long-term viewers. American Dad rewards regular, attentive viewing by building on previous episodes and developing ongoing storylines. You understand characters better and appreciate moments more when you've seen their full history. Callbacks and references to past episodes create layers of meaning that deepen the comedy. Family Guy doesn't reward long-term viewing in the same way because each episode stands alone. You don't need to have seen previous episodes to understand what's happening, which makes Family Guy more accessible for casual viewing, yet also means there's less reason to stay invested over time. The approach to continuity also shapes how the shows handle major character relationships. In American Dad, when two characters share a conflict or bonding moment, that experience shapes how they interact in future episodes. The relationship has memory. Characters reference past experiences when they talk. Their shared history informs their present interactions. In Family Guy, characters can have intense experiences together in one episode and then interact as if nothing happened in the next. Relationships have no memory or history in any meaningful sense. Every episode starts from the same baseline, regardless of what came before. American Dad's continuity creates opportunities for callbacks that deepen the comedy for regular viewers. The show can reference events from seasons earlier, and viewers who remember will appreciate the connection. These callbacks reward attention and make the world feel richer and more interconnected. Family Guy makes fewer meaningful callbacks because its episodic structure means events don't really carry forward. When Family Guy does reference previous episodes, it's usually just for a quick joke rather than to build on established continuity. These different approaches reflect different philosophies about what television should be. American Dad treats itself as an ongoing story viewers follow over time, asking for investment and commitment. Family Guy treats itself as a collection of independent comedy units that can be consumed in any order, asking for less investment and offering a more casual experience. Both approaches have their place and their audiences. Some viewers prefer the continuity and character development of American Dad because it makes them feel more connected to the characters and more invested in outcomes. Others prefer the episodic nature of Family Guy because they can watch any episode without needing context and because they value joke density over narrative consistency. Understanding these approaches helps explain why viewers might prefer one show over the other based on what they want from their comedy. The continuity issue also shapes how each show handles serialized versus episodic storytelling. American Dad can do multi-episode arcs where a storyline develops across several episodes because the show maintains continuity. It has the infrastructure to support complex stories that unfold over time. Family Guy occasionally attempts multi-episode stories, yet they often feel disconnected because the show hasn't built the continuity infrastructure to support them. The lack of established continuity makes it harder for Family Guy to tell complex stories that require viewers to remember what happened before. Before we move on, be sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. The way each show handles continuity connects directly to how they treat their characters and whether those characters are respected as people with dignity or simply used as tools for whatever joke the writers want to make. Section 6. Respectful character treatment. How a show treats its characters reveals a great deal about what the creators value and what kind of emotional experience they want to create. American Dad and Family Guy differ dramatically in how they treat their characters and whether those characters are afforded dignity and respect. American Dad generally treats its characters as people who deserve basic respect, even when they're being ridiculous or making mistakes. Family Guy increasingly treats its characters as punching bags who exist solely to be mocked and abused for comedy. This difference shapes how viewers relate to the shows and whether they can emotionally invest in what happens to these characters. American Dad maintains a baseline of respect for its characters even when they're doing foolish things or facing embarrassment. The show lets characters have dignity and be competent in their own ways. Stan might be paranoid and extreme in his politics, yet he's also shown to be good at his job and capable of growth. The show mocks Stan's beliefs and his rigidity, yet it doesn't mock Stan as a person. We laugh at Stan's situations while still understanding that he's a complete human being with strengths and weaknesses. The show treats him as someone worthy of our attention and even our sympathy at times. When Stan faces consequences for his actions, they feel fair rather than cruel. The show wants us to see Stan as flawed, yet fundamentally redeemable. Francine receives particularly good treatment compared to how housewife characters are often portrayed in animated sitcoms. The show doesn't treat her as stupid or helpless just because she's a housewife. Episodes explore Francine's intelligence, her talents, and her frustrations with her limited role. When Francine does something foolish, the show presents it as a mistake anyone might make, rather than proof that she's fundamentally incompetent. The show lets Francine be capable and skilled in many areas, while also having flaws and insecurities like any real person. She has episodes where she excels at business, or reveals artistic talent, or demonstrates skills that surprise even her family. The show respects that being a housewife doesn't mean she lacks abilities or intelligence. Haley is treated with respect as a character who has genuine beliefs and reasons for them. The show disagrees with some of Haley's more extreme liberal positions and makes fun of them, yet it doesn't treat Haley herself as a joke. Her values and her activism are presented as coming from a real place of caring about the world, even when her methods or specific positions are satirized. The show lets Haley be right sometimes and have legitimate criticisms of Stan's worldview. She's not just a straw man for the show to knock down. Episodes show Haley making good points and forcing Stan to realize he was wrong. The show respects that Haley's political views come from genuine concern about justice and fairness, even while mocking how she expresses them. Steve is perhaps the best example of American Dad's respectful treatment. He's a nerdy, unathletic teenager who struggles socially and romantically. Many shows would make Steve purely pathetic and use him as a constant source of humiliation humor. American Dad does put Steve in embarrassing situations, yet the show also lets him have victories and accomplishments. He's talented at singing and theater. He has loyal friends who genuinely care about him. He's intelligent and creative. The show mocks Steve's awkwardness while also presenting him as a person with real value and potential. We laugh with Steve as much as at him. When he fails at something, the show treats it as a learning experience rather than confirmation that he's worthless. Episodes show Steve developing confidence and skills over time. Even Roger, who is often selfish and terrible to the Smiths, is treated with a certain respect. The show acknowledges that his behavior is problematic, yet it also explores why he acts the way he does. Roger is lonely and alienated as an alien living among humans. His personas and schemes are ways of connecting with the world and feeling like he matters. The show lets Roger have depth and vulnerability beneath his selfishness. When he does genuinely kind things for the family, those moments feel meaningful because the show has established him as a complete character rather than just a source of chaos. The show doesn't merely use Roger for random comedy. His actions come from his character and his needs as an alien trying to find his place in human society. American Dad also treats its supporting characters with respect. Minor characters who appear occasionally have consistent personalities and are presented as real people with their own lives and motivations. The show doesn't just use them as punchlines. When a supporting character appears, they bring their established traits and relationships with them, creating a world populated by actual people rather than comedy props. Even characters who appear in only 1 or 2 episodes are given enough development to feel like real individuals. Family Guy treats many of its characters very differently, particularly in the later seasons, where the show has developed a cruel streak in which certain characters exist primarily to be abused and humiliated. The most obvious example is Meg, who receives truly brutal treatment. She's constantly mocked by her family, by other characters, and by the show itself. She's treated as worthless and unlovable. The abuse goes far beyond normal sibling teasing or parental frustration. The entire family seems to genuinely hate Meg and wish she didn't exist. Peter tells Meg directly that he doesn't care about her. The family forgets her birthday. They exclude her from family activities. The cruelty is relentless. What makes it especially troubling is that Meg hasn't done anything to deserve it. She's just a normal teenager trying to fit in and be accepted. The show treats her terribly simply because that's her role in the show's comedy structure. Episodes will have entire scenes whose only joke is everyone being mean to Meg. The abuse is relentless and mean-spirited in ways that stop being funny and start being uncomfortable to watch. The show occasionally gives Meg a moment of standing up for herself, yet those moments are immediately undercut or forgotten by the next episode. When Meg fights back, the show punishes her for it or makes her look worse. Peter's treatment has also shifted over the seasons in ways that show a lack of respect for the character. Early Peter was stupid and made mistakes, yet he was still recognizable as a human being who loved his family. Later, Peter became so incredibly dumb and mean that it's hard to see him as a person at all. He's just a collection of the worst possible human traits amplified to maximum levels. The show no longer seems to have any affection for Peter. He exists to do terrible things that create comedy through shock value rather than through character. His stupidity has moved beyond endearing foolishness into genuine cruelty and malice. He does things that intentionally hurt his family and shows no remorse. Lois has been reduced in similar ways. She started as a complex character, who was patient with Peter while having her own desires and frustrations. Later seasons have made Lois either a nagging shrew or someone who inexplicably tolerates Peter's increasingly abusive behavior. The show doesn't treat Lois as a real person with understandable motivations. She's whatever the episode needs her to be, whether that's the voice of reason or the butt of jokes about aging or sexuality. Episodes have Lois behaving completely differently from one to the next based on plot requirements rather than on who she is. Brian's treatment is interesting because the show seems aware that he has become insufferable, yet it keeps writing him that way. Episodes mock Brian for being a hypocritical pseudo-intellectual, yet they don't actually reform his character. The show treats Brian with a kind of contempt, presenting him as someone who thinks he's better than everyone while actually being terrible. This could be effective satire if the show committed to it, yet instead, Brian continues to be used as a mouthpiece for the writer's views, even while the show mocks him for being preachy. The show wants it both ways, using Brian to express opinions while also making fun of him for having them. The physical comedy in Family Guy often crosses into genuinely disturbing violence and suffering. Characters get hurt in graphic ways that go beyond typical cartoon violence. The injuries are shown in detail, and the suffering is prolonged for comedic effect. Characters have bones broken in visible ways or are injured in grotesque detail. This approach shows a lack of respect for the characters as people. They're just bodies that can be damaged for laughs, without any consideration for how it affects them as characters or how it makes viewers feel watching it. Family Guy also engages in what could be called humiliation humor, where the entire point is to embarrass and degrade characters. Episodes put characters in situations designed purely to humiliate them with no other purpose. The show seems to enjoy making characters suffer and be degraded. This kind of humor requires viewers to take pleasure in seeing characters they theoretically care about being hurt and embarrassed. It creates a mean-spirited tone that makes it harder to actually like these characters or want good things for them. The humor comes from watching people at their lowest points rather than from watching people navigate challenges with dignity. The treatment of death and serious injury also differs between the shows. American Dad generally treats serious harm as actually serious. When something bad happens to a character, the show acknowledges it and gives it weight. Characters who are hurt need time to recover. Events that should be traumatic are treated as traumatic. Family Guy treats death and injury as completely disposable. Characters die and come back without explanation. Serious injuries are played for laughs and then forgotten. This casual treatment of serious harm shows a lack of respect for the characters and for consequences in general. These different approaches shape how viewers emotionally connect with each show. American Dad's respectful treatment lets viewers actually care about what happens to the characters. We want Stan and Francine to work through their problems. We want Steve to succeed and find confidence. We want good things for these characters because the show has presented them as worthy of our care. Family Guy's cruel treatment makes it harder to care about their fates. Why should we care what happens to Meg when the show clearly doesn't care about her? Why invest in these characters when the show treats them as disposable jokes? The treatment issue also shapes the comedy itself. Comedy that comes from character while respecting those characters tends to be more sustainable and more satisfying than comedy that comes from degrading them. When we laugh at Stan's paranoia in American Dad, we're laughing at a human flaw while still seeing Stan as human. When we're supposed to laugh at Meg being abused in Family Guy, we're being asked to take pleasure in cruelty. One type of humor brings people together through shared recognition of human foolishness. The other is divisive and mean, requiring a certain callousness from viewers that not everyone is comfortable providing. American Dad proves you can have edgy, boundary-pushing comedy while still maintaining respect for your characters. The show is not wholesome or overly nice. It puts its characters in difficult and embarrassing situations. It mocks their flaws and mistakes. Yet it does all of this while keeping a foundation of basic respect for these people as people. They have dignity even when they're being ridiculous. Family Guy shows what happens when that foundation erodes and characters become purely tools for whatever joke the writers want to make, regardless of how it affects them or how it makes viewers feel. The respectful treatment in American Dad also allows for more varied storytelling. When characters are respected, you can tell different kinds of stories with them: comedy episodes, dramatic episodes, emotional episodes, and everything in between. When characters are just punching bags, you can really only do comedy of humiliation. The range of what's possible narrows because of the lack of respect for the characters as complete people. Before we move on, be sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. The way each show treats its characters connects directly to how each explores themes and whether the comedy serves a larger purpose beyond just making people laugh. Section 7. Thematic depth. When you evaluate what makes a television show meaningful beyond pure entertainment, one important factor is whether the show explores themes and ideas that give it substance. Thematic depth is about whether a show consistently examines certain topics, questions, or aspects of human experience in ways that make viewers think or feel something beyond just laughter. American Dad and Family Guy differ significantly in their thematic depth and in whether their comedy serves larger purposes. American Dad explores consistent themes about family, politics, identity, and American culture throughout its run. Family Guy focuses primarily on generating laughs by whatever means available, without building toward any consistent thematic exploration. American Dad uses its premise to examine themes about American identity and what it means to be American in the modern world. Stan represents a very specific vision of American identity built on patriotism, traditional values, and fear of threats to the American way of life. The show uses Stan's extreme version of these attitudes to probe questions about national identity that many Americans actually grapple with. What does patriotism really mean? How do we balance security with freedom? What values actually define America? These questions run through many episodes and give the show weight beyond just being funny. When Stan does something extreme in the name of patriotism, the show is asking viewers to consider where the line falls between reasonable love of country and dangerous nationalism. These questions matter in real life, which makes the show's exploration of them feel important. The theme of political division within families appears repeatedly through Stan and Haley's relationship. Their conflicts aren't just there to create comedy through disagreement. The show is examining how political polarization affects families and whether people with very different political views can still love each other and live together. This resonates with many American families who have experienced similar divisions, especially in recent years when political disagreements have grown more intense and personal. The show offers no easy answers about resolving these divisions, which makes its exploration feel honest and realistic. Stan and Haley don't suddenly start agreeing. They learn to coexist despite their differences, finding moments of connection even when their fundamental beliefs remain opposed. Episodes show them arguing about politics, yet still showing up for each other when it really matters. This exploration of political division within loving relationships gives the show emotional depth and social relevance. American Dad also explores themes about masculinity and what it means to be a man. Stan has rigid ideas about masculine behavior. He believes men should be strong, stoic, aggressive, and in control. His son Steve doesn't fit that mold, which creates ongoing conflict and forces Stan to examine his assumptions. Episodes dealing with Stan and Steve's relationship often explore whether there's only one acceptable way to be a man or whether men can express themselves differently and still have value. The show suggests that rigid definitions of masculinity cause pain for both men who fit the mold and men who don't. Stan suffers from his inability to show vulnerability or admit weakness. Steve suffers from feeling like he can never measure up to his father's expectations. Over many seasons, Stan slowly learns to accept Steve's different approach to being male. This thematic arc about expanding definitions of masculinity feels meaningful because it connects to real struggles many families face. The theme of identity and self-discovery appears through multiple characters, yet especially through Francine. Episodes explore her struggle to figure out who she is beyond being Stan's wife and the kid's mother. She had a life before marriage and has desires and talents that go beyond her domestic role. The show examines what it means to hold on to your individual identity while also being part of a family, a theme that matters to anyone who has felt their identity get lost in their relationships or responsibilities. Francine's journey towards self-discovery unfolds gradually across many seasons and gives her character meaningful development. Episodes show her trying different hobbies, pursuing forgotten dreams, and questioning whether her current life is really what she wants. These explorations feel real because many people go through similar questioning about their identities and choices. American Dad explores themes about belonging and acceptance through Roger. As an alien living among humans, Roger is fundamentally an outsider who can never fully belong to human society. His endless personas and disguises represent attempts to find acceptance and connection in a world where his true self isn't welcome. Episodes about Roger often deal with loneliness, the desire to belong, and what happens when you can never show your true self to others. These themes give Roger emotional depth that lifts him beyond just being a source of chaos. Many viewers can relate to feeling like an outsider or having to hide their true selves to fit in, which makes Roger's struggles meaningful despite him being a literal alien. The show uses his extreme situation to explore universal human feelings about acceptance and belonging. The show also examines themes about government power and authority. Stan works for a government agency that operates in secret and holds enormous power over people's lives. Episodes explore when government power is justified and when it becomes tyrannical. The show satirizes how institutions can become corrupt or misguided even when they're supposed to be protecting people. These themes connect to real debates about surveillance, civil liberties, and government accountability. The show asks whether we should trust institutions with power just because they claim to be protecting us. Episodes show the CIA doing things that are clearly wrong, yet justified through national security arguments. This exploration gives the show's political satire depth and purpose. American Dad explores themes about suburban life and the American dream. The Smiths live in a suburban house and chase the standard middle-class American lifestyle. Episodes examine whether that lifestyle actually delivers the happiness and fulfillment it promises. The show looks at the pressure to conform, the fear of being different, and the emptiness that can come from pursuing material success without questioning what really matters. These themes give the satire depth because the show is critiquing specific aspects of American culture rather than just tossing off random jokes. Episodes show characters buying things they don't need to impress people they don't like, something many Americans can relate to. The satire is usually specific rather than vague, identifying particular contradictions or absurdities in how society functions. Family Guy approaches themes very differently. The show doesn't explore consistent themes across episodes. An episode might brush against various topics, yet the show never builds a coherent thematic framework. You can't point to Family Guy and say it's consistently examining certain questions or ideas the way you can with American Dad. Family Guy cares more about being funny moment to moment than about building thematic depth over time. Episodes might touch on topics like religion, or politics, or social issues, yet those topics are treated as sources of jokes rather than as subjects worthy of genuine exploration. When Family Guy does attempt to address a theme, it usually does so superficially. An episode might be about a topic like religion or politics, yet the treatment stays at surface level. The show makes jokes about the topic without really exploring what it means or why it matters. An episode about religion might mock religious people and institutions without examining what religion actually means to people or why they believe. The jokes exist for their own sake, rather than serving any deeper exploration of ideas. The show doesn't ask questions or challenge viewers to think about these topics in new ways. It just makes obvious jokes and moves on. Family Guy's lack of consistent themes makes it harder for the show to have lasting impact beyond entertainment. You watch an episode, laugh at some jokes, and then it's over. There's nothing to think about afterward because the show hasn't given you anything substantial to consider. American Dad episodes can linger in your mind because they've explored ideas that connect to real aspects of life and society. You might find yourself thinking about an American Dad episode days later because it raised interesting questions about politics or identity or relationships. Family Guy episodes don't linger because they were just collections of jokes without deeper meaning. The different approaches to themes also shape how the shows age. American Dad's thematic explorations often stay relevant because human questions about identity, family, and belonging don't change much over time. Episodes exploring these themes can be watched years later and still feel meaningful. The themes are timeless because they deal with aspects of human experience that persist across generations. Family Guy's lack of themes means the show relies more on topical references and shock value, which date quickly. When the references are no longer current and the shock value has worn off, there's nothing left to carry the episode. Watching older Family Guy episodes often feels like looking at outdated humor tied too closely to its specific moment in time. American Dad uses its themes to give characters motivation and development. Characters change and grow based on the themes the show is exploring. Stan's journey toward accepting Haley's differences and Steve's unconventional masculinity is a thematic arc spanning many seasons. We watch Stan slowly become less rigid as he grapples with questions about what really matters in family relationships. This thematic development makes Stan's evolution feel earned and meaningful. The changes happen because the show is consistently exploring themes about family and acceptance. Family Guy's characters can't develop in the same way because the show doesn't explore consistent themes that would drive that development. Without thematic foundations, character growth has nowhere to come from and nowhere to go. The thematic depth in American Dad also creates opportunities for episodes that balance comedy with genuine emotion. When an episode is exploring meaningful themes about family or identity, the comedy can work alongside emotional moments without feeling inconsistent. The themes give weight to the emotional beats and make them feel earned. An episode can be funny throughout, yet still deliver a genuinely touching moment in the third act because the theme has been building toward that payoff. Family Guy struggles with emotional moments because it hasn't built thematic foundations to support them. When Family Guy tries to be emotional, it often feels forced or manipulative because the show hasn't earned those moments through consistent thematic exploration. The emotional scenes feel tacked on rather than organic. American Dad's themes also connect to its satirical approach to humor. Satire works best when it's examining specific ideas or institutions, which requires thematic focus. American Dad's satire of American politics and culture is effective because the show consistently explores themes about what those things mean and how they affect people. The satire serves the themes, and the themes give the satire purpose. Each satirical episode contributes to the show's ongoing examination of American identity and values. Family Guy's more scattershot approach doesn't support deep thematic exploration because the show is always jumping to new topics and new jokes without building on what came before. Before we move on, be sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. The thematic differences between these shows connect directly to how each structures its episodes and manages pacing to keep viewers engaged. Section 8. Pacing and episode structure. The way a show structures its episodes and manages pacing shapes how enjoyable it is to watch and how well the comedy works. American Dad and Family Guy take very different approaches to episode structure and pacing that reflect their different priorities. American Dad uses traditional sitcom structure with a clear beginning, middle, and end, while maintaining steady pacing that lets jokes and plot breathe. Family Guy uses a fragmented structure dominated by cutaway gags and maintains frenetic pacing that prioritizes maximum joke density over coherent storytelling. American Dad episodes typically follow a 3-act structure familiar to anyone who watches sitcoms. The first act establishes the situation and introduces the problem or conflict that will drive the episode. The second act develops that conflict and shows characters trying to solve their problem, usually making things worse before they get better. The third act brings the conflict to a resolution and usually includes some kind of lesson or change for the characters. This structure creates a satisfying experience because the episode feels complete. You watch a story with a beginning, middle, and end, rather than just a collection of scenes. The structure gives the episode shape and purpose, making the journey from opening to conclusion feel meaningful. The pacing in American Dad is measured and lets moments develop naturally. When a joke is told, there's time for it to land before the next one arrives. When a character has an emotional moment, there's space for that emotion to register. The show doesn't race through scenes in a desperate attempt to cram in as many jokes as possible. This measured pacing creates a more relaxed experience that feels less exhausting than Family Guy's constant barrage. You can actually follow what's happening and process the comedy and the story at the same time. Your brain has time to appreciate each joke and each plot development before being asked to focus on the next thing. American Dad's structure allows for proper setup and payoff. When something is established early, it can pay off later in satisfying ways. The show plants seeds in the first act that grow into important plot points or jokes in later acts, creating a sense of cohesion where everything in the episode matters and connects. Viewers feel rewarded for paying attention because details that seemed minor early turn out to be important later. A throwaway line in the first act becomes crucial information in the third. A character's offhand comment returns as the key to solving the problem. This kind of tight storytelling requires careful structure and pacing to work. The show also uses the A-plot and B-plot structure effectively. The A-plot is the main story that takes up most of the episode's time and attention. The B-plot is a smaller secondary story, often involving different characters. American Dad usually gives most of its attention to the A-plot while using the B-plot to add variety and give other characters something to do. These plots sometimes intersect in the third act, creating satisfying moments where separate storylines come together in unexpected ways. This structure lets the show develop multiple characters in the same episode while keeping focus on the main story. The B-plot provides breaks from the main story without completely disrupting it, keeping the pacing dynamic without becoming chaotic. American Dad's pacing also allows for character moments that don't serve immediate comedic purposes. Characters can have conversations that develop relationships or reveal personality without every line being a joke. These moments make the characters feel more real and give viewers reason to care about what happens to them. The show understands that comedy is more effective when it emerges from character and situation, which requires taking time to establish who these people are and what they care about. A scene might simply be Stan and Francine talking about their day without jokes, which establishes their relationship and makes later conflicts more meaningful. This willingness to slow down and let characters be people makes the comedy more impactful when it arrives. The structure creates natural peaks and valleys in tension and comedy. Episodes build toward climactic moments rather than maintaining the same intensity throughout. This variation keeps viewers engaged because the pacing feels dynamic rather than monotonous. You get moments of high-energy comedy followed by quieter moments that let you catch your breath before building toward the next peak. This rhythm makes episodes feel well-crafted rather than random, guiding you through emotional highs and lows in ways that feel intentional and satisfying. Family Guy's episode structure is fundamentally different because of the cutaway gag format. Episodes start with a thin plot that serves as an excuse to deliver cutaway gags rather than as a story worth following. The plot might be about Peter starting a business or the family going on vacation, yet that plot gets interrupted constantly by cutaways showing completely unrelated scenes. The structure feels fragmented because your attention is constantly pulled away from the main story to look at random jokes. Just when you start to get invested in what's happening with the characters, the show cuts away to show Peter fighting a giant chicken or reminiscing about the time he met a celebrity. These interruptions prevent the plot from building momentum or developing in satisfying ways. The pacing is frenetic and relentless. The show delivers jokes at a rapid rate, often fitting 10 or 15 jokes into a 3-minute sequence through cutaways. There's no breathing room between jokes. As soon as one cutaway ends, another begins. This creates an exhausting experience where you're constantly hit with new information and new comedy without time to process anything. The rapid pace can be exciting in short bursts, yet it becomes tiring over a full episode or multiple episodes. Your brain doesn't have time to appreciate each individual joke before being asked to laugh at the next. The comedy becomes a blur of constant stimulation without peaks or valleys. Family Guy's structure makes proper setup and payoff difficult because the cutaways disrupt any momentum the plot might build. The show establishes something in the main plot, cuts away to an unrelated scene, cuts away to another unrelated scene, and by the time it returns to the plot, viewers have lost track of what was happening. The constant interruptions prevent the show from building tension or developing situations in satisfying ways. Everything feels scattered rather than cohesive. You can't follow narrative threads because they keep getting interrupted. The show asks you to hold multiple disconnected pieces of information in your head without giving you a framework to organize them into a coherent story. The show occasionally attempts an A-plot and B-plot structure, yet the cutaways often overwhelm both plots. You might have Peter's story as the A-plot and Brian's story as the B-plot, yet both get interrupted so frequently by cutaways that neither feels substantial. The structure becomes less about two stories intersecting and more about random comedy happening between brief glimpses of plot. The stories don't feel important enough to invest in emotionally because the show itself doesn't seem to care about them. They exist only as frameworks to hang jokes on rather than as narratives worth following. Family Guy's pacing leaves no room for character moments that don't serve immediate comedy. Every scene needs to deliver jokes constantly, or the show cuts away to something that will. This means characters rarely get to just talk to each other and develop relationships. Every interaction is either a setup for a joke or a cutaway trigger. The relentless focus on comedy prevents the show from building the character foundations that would make the comedy more effective. We don't get to know these people as people, which makes it harder to care about their situations or find their problems funny. The structure maintains the same high intensity throughout without variation. Episodes are just continuous comedy from start to finish with no peaks and valleys. This consistent intensity actually makes the comedy less effective because there's no contrast. When everything is loud and fast and funny, nothing stands out as particularly special. The lack of quieter moments makes it harder to appreciate the comedy when it does work well. Good comedy needs rhythm and variation to be most effective, which Family Guy's structure doesn't provide. The structure also makes it difficult to build toward satisfying conclusions. episodes just kind of end when time runs out rather than building to proper climaxes. The resolution of whatever conflict the episode set up often feels rushed or arbitrary because the show spent so much time on cutaway gags that there's no time left to properly resolve the plot. Viewers are left unsatisfied because the story doesn't really go anywhere or conclude in a meaningful way. The episode just stops rather than ending in a way that feels earned or purposeful. The different pacing and structure shape how well each show works in different viewing contexts. American Dad's measured pacing and coherent structure make it good for focused viewing where you're actually paying attention. The story and character development reward attention and engagement. You get more out of the episode when you follow it closely. Family Guy's rapid pacing and fragmented structure make it better for casual viewing where you're not fully focused. You can look away and look back without missing much because the cutaways are self-contained jokes that don't require context. Each joke stands alone, which means you don't need to follow the episode closely to find individual moments funny. The structural differences also shape how well episodes hold up to repeat viewing. American Dad episodes can be rewatched, and you'll notice new details or appreciate jokes differently with the full context of the episode. The coherent structure means there are layers to discover through rewatching. You might catch a subtle background joke, or notice how a line in the first act connects to the resolution in the third. Family Guy episodes are harder to rewatch because once you've seen the cutaway gags, there's not much reason to see them again. The random structure means there aren't hidden depths to discover. The jokes work the same way every time because they don't depend on context or build on each other. American Dad's structure allows for more sophisticated comedy that relies on setup throughout the episode. A joke in the third act can call back to something established in the first, creating comedy through the connection between those moments. The structure supports running gags that develop across the episode, getting funnier each time they appear because they build on previous iterations. Family Guy's structure makes this kind of sophisticated comedy difficult because the cutaways constantly disrupt the flow and make it hard to plant and pay off jokes across the episode. Running gags can't develop because the cutaways prevent the necessary continuity. Before we move on, be sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. The structural and pacing differences also shape how each show approaches satire versus parody and what kinds of comedy each one prioritizes. Section 9. Political satire versus pop culture parody. The type of humor a show relies on reveals a lot about its goals and its relationship with the audience. American Dad and Family Guy represent two very different approaches to comedy that have become common in modern animated sitcoms. American Dad builds much of its humor through political and social satire that comments on real institutions and attitudes. Family Guy relies heavily on pop culture parody and references that depend on viewers recognizing specific movies, television shows, and celebrity moments. These different approaches produce different viewing experiences and different relationships between the show and the cultural moment in which it exists. American Dad's political satire works by exaggerating real attitudes and behaviors to expose what's absurd or troubling about them. The show takes something that actually exists in American politics or culture and pushes it to an extreme that makes its flaws obvious. Stan's paranoia about terrorism is satire because real people became paranoid after September 11th, and the show exaggerates that paranoia to comment on how fear can make people behave irrationally. When Stan builds a panic room in his house or treats every stranger as a potential terrorist, the show is satirizing how fear-based politics affected ordinary Americans. The comedy comes from recognition. Viewers see their own world reflected back in distorted form and can laugh at the absurdity while also recognizing the truth underneath. The satire works because it's rooted in observable reality that viewers can verify in their own lives or in the news. The satire targets systems and institutions rather than just individuals. The show satirizes the CIA as an organization that operates without accountability and often works against American interests while claiming to protect them. Episodes show the CIA doing things that are ridiculous yet also plausible given what we know about real intelligence agencies. Stan's colleagues are shown as incompetent, corrupt, or absurdly focused on the wrong priorities. The satire works because it's grounded in reality. We know intelligence agencies do questionable things in secret, so when American Dad shows the CIA being incompetent or corrupt, it feels like commentary rather than just random jokes. The show is making arguments about how power works and how institutions can drift from their stated purposes. American Dad satirizes conservative political attitudes through Stan, while simultaneously satirizing liberal attitudes through Haley. The show isn't partisan. It mocks both sides of American political debates by showing how each can be extreme or hypocritical. Stan represents conservative attitudes taken to absurd extremes, which satirizes conservatism. He's paranoid, inflexible, and willing to violate people's rights in the name of security. Haley represents liberal attitudes taken to absurd extremes, which satirizes liberalism. She's self-righteous, impractical, and sometimes more concerned with appearing virtuous than actually helping people. The show's satire is balanced because it's willing to mock any political position when that position becomes rigid or detached from reality. This balanced approach makes the satire feel fair rather than preachy. The show satirizes American foreign policy through Stan's work and through episodes dealing with international issues. When the show sets an episode in another country, it often satirizes both American attitudes toward that country and aspects of that country's culture. The satire works on multiple levels because it examines how different cultures interact and misunderstand each other. Episodes satirize American arrogance and ignorance about other countries, while also satirizing aspects of those countries that deserve criticism. This nuanced approach makes the show feel intelligent and thoughtful. It's not simply saying America is always wrong or always right. It's examining how different perspectives clash and how everyone can have blind spots. American Dad satirizes consumer culture and materialism through episodes about the Smiths trying to acquire things or achieve status. The show mocks how Americans define success through possessions and how advertising manipulates people into wanting things they don't need. Episodes show characters chasing material goals that make them miserable, satirizing the American dream and questioning whether material success actually leads to happiness. This satire connects to real anxieties many Americans have about whether they're living meaningful lives or just consuming and working without purpose. The show asks whether the lifestyle Americans are told to want actually delivers the fulfillment it promises. The satire stays relevant over time because it targets ongoing aspects of American life rather than specific current events. The show satirizes paranoia, nationalism, political division, consumerism, and government overreach. These things persist across different administrations and cultural moments. Episodes from 10 years ago still feel relevant because they satirize patterns in American culture that haven't changed. The satire has staying power because it goes deeper than just mocking whatever is in the news this week. The show is examining fundamental aspects of American identity and politics that transcend any particular moment. Family Guy takes a completely different approach, relying heavily on pop culture parody and references. The show constantly references movies, television shows, music, and celebrity moments. A typical episode might include references to Star Wars, The Brady Bunch, Madonna, politicians, news events, and dozens of other cultural touchstones. The humor depends on viewers recognizing these references and finding the show's treatment of them funny. When Family Guy does a cutaway parodying a movie scene, the joke only works if you've seen that movie and can appreciate how Family Guy is distorting or mocking it. The reference itself becomes the joke rather than using the reference to make a point about something larger. Pop culture parody serves several purposes in Family Guy. It lets the show comment on other media and entertainment, though usually only superficially. It creates moments of recognition for viewers who get the references, which can be satisfying in its own way. It fills time without requiring plot development or character work. It establishes the show as culturally aware and current by referencing recent events and media. The parody becomes a way for the show to prove it knows what's happening in the world and can mock it. The constant references also give the show a kind of cultural relevance by inserting itself into conversations about whatever is popular at the moment. The problem with relying on pop culture parody is that it dates quickly. References that felt current when an episode aired become obscure within a few years. Watching old Family Guy episodes often means encountering references to celebrities, movies, or events that younger viewers don't recognize. The jokes stop working once the cultural moment has passed. An episode parodying a specific politician or celebrity scandal might be funny when it airs, yet becomes incomprehensible 5 years later when viewers don't remember who that person was or what they did. The humor has a short shelf life because it's tied to specific moments in pop culture that quickly become history. Family Guy's parody also tends to be superficial compared to American Dad's satire. The show references things without really examining them or saying anything meaningful about them. A cutaway might show Peter acting out a scene from a movie, yet the parody doesn't comment on what that movie meant or why it mattered culturally. The joke is just that Family Guy is showing you this reference. The comedy comes purely from recognition, rather than from any insight about the thing being referenced. This makes the humor feel empty compared to satire that actually has something to say. The show points at things, but doesn't examine them or use them to explore ideas. The show's approach to political humor demonstrates the difference between satire and parody clearly. When American Dad deals with politics, it satirizes political attitudes and behaviors in ways that reveal something true about how politics works. The show examines why people believe what they believe and how political divisions affect relationships. When Family Guy deals with politics, it usually just parodies specific politicians by showing them doing silly things or making obvious jokes about their appearance or personality. Family Guy had episodes featuring Bill Clinton, Barack Obama, and Donald Trump, where the joke was just that these people exist and have certain characteristics everyone knows about. The episodes didn't examine what these politicians represented or what their leadership meant for the country. The humor stayed at the level of simple parody without deeper engagement with political ideas. Family Guy's reliance on pop culture references also creates a barrier for some viewers. If you haven't seen the movies or shows being referenced, many jokes won't make sense. The humor requires specific cultural knowledge that not everyone possesses, which makes the show less accessible than American Dad, where the satire can be appreciated even if you don't recognize every specific reference. American Dad satirizes recognizable types and situations anyone can understand. You don't need to have seen particular movies or know specific celebrities to grasp what the show is satirizing. Family Guy parodies specific cultural products that require familiarity to appreciate. The different approaches also reflect different levels of confidence in the material. American Dad's satire suggests the show trusts that its own ideas and characters are funny enough to carry episodes. The satire grows out of the show's premise and characters rather than depending on external references. The show believes its commentary on American life is interesting and valuable on its own terms. Family Guy's constant pop culture parody suggests the show doesn't trust its own material to be funny without constantly pointing to other things. The show relies on borrowed cultural material rather than creating its own comic situations. This dependency can make the show feel less original and less confident in its own voice. American Dad satire lets the show participate in cultural conversations in meaningful ways. When the show satirizes something about American politics or culture, it's making an argument about it. Viewers can agree or disagree with the show's perspective, which creates engagement beyond just laughing. The satire gives people something to think about and discuss. People can debate whether the show's take is fair or insightful. Family Guy's parody doesn't create the same engagement because it isn't really making arguments. The show is just pointing at things and making jokes without taking positions or examining ideas. There's nothing to debate or discuss beyond whether you found a particular reference funny. The satirical approach also allows for more sophisticated comedy that works on multiple levels. A scene can be funny on the surface while also making a deeper point about politics or society. Viewers who want to engage with the satire can find layers of meaning, while viewers who just want to laugh can enjoy the surface comedy. The show rewards both casual and attentive viewing. Family Guy's parody works only on one level. You either get the reference or you don't. There are no hidden depths to discover. The joke exists purely in the moment of recognition, without offering anything more to think about. American Dad satire respects the audience's intelligence by assuming viewers can understand commentary on politics and culture. The show doesn't talk down to viewers or explain its satire. It presents situations and trusts viewers to see what's being satirized and why. The show assumes its audience is capable of understanding complex ideas about American life. Family Guy's parody often feels like it's assuming viewers just want to see familiar things rather than engage with ideas. The show gives viewers what it thinks they want, rather than challenging them to think critically about the culture around them. Before we move on, be sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. These different approaches to humor connect directly to how each show uses its cast and whether the show functions as an ensemble piece or as a vehicle for one main character. Section 10. Ensemble versus individual focus. How a show distributes attention and development among its characters reveals important things about its priorities and its approach to storytelling. American Dad operates as a true ensemble show where multiple characters receive substantial development and screen time. Family Guy has increasingly become a show dominated by one or two characters, while others are neglected or reduced to one-note jokes. This difference in ensemble versus individual focus shapes the variety of stories each show can tell and how well the shows hold viewer interest over many seasons. American Dad treats all the members of the Smith family as important characters worthy of development and their own storylines. Stan is the nominal lead because his job and personality drive many plots, yet he doesn't dominate the show the way Peter dominates Family Guy. Episodes regularly focus on other family members as the main character. Francine gets episodes exploring her past, her desires, and her identity, separate from being a wife and mother. Episodes about Francine reveal that she has a complicated history and talents that go beyond her domestic role. Haley gets episodes about her activism, her relationships, and her struggles to find purpose in the world. Her political beliefs and personal relationships both receive serious attention. Steve gets episodes about adolescence, friendship, and growing up that treat his experiences as genuinely important rather than just fodder for jokes. Even Roger and Klaus, who aren't technically family members, get substantial focus and development across many episodes. The ensemble approach lets the show tell different types of stories depending on which character is the focus. Episodes centered on Stan tend to be about politics, paranoia, and learning to accept people who are different from him. Episodes centered on Francine tend to be about identity, marriage, and rediscovering passions she gave up when she became a housewife. Episodes centered on Steve tend to be about coming of age and finding confidence in himself despite not fitting traditional masculine ideals. Episodes centered on Roger tend to be about identity and belonging. exploring what it means to be an outsider who can never fully integrate into society. This variety keeps the show fresh because it isn't telling the same type of story every week. The ensemble structure gives the writers more tools to work with and more possibilities to explore. American Dad also does a good job of featuring multiple characters in the same episode without making anyone feel like just a side player. Episodes will have an A plot focusing on one character and a B plot focusing on another, with both plots receiving substantial attention and development. Sometimes the plots intersect in the third act, creating satisfying moments where different characters' stories connect in unexpected ways. Other times the plots remain separate throughout, which allows for variety within a single episode by showing two different types of stories happening at once. The show trusts that viewers are interested in all these characters rather than just one. The show also develops relationships between different pairs of characters, creating more storytelling possibilities. Stan and Francine's marriage is explored in depth across many episodes, examining how they stay together despite their differences. Stan and Haley's father-daughter relationship with political conflict is a recurring source of stories about family bonds across ideological divides. Stan and Steve's father-son relationship and differing views of masculinity create another set of stories about acceptance and changing definitions of what it means to be a man. Francine and Haley's mother-daughter relationship gets explored in episodes about identity and expectations. Steve and his friends get episodes that function almost like separate coming-of-age stories. Roger has a distinct relationship with each family member that can be examined. Klaus has his own dynamic with the family as an outsider who desperately wants to belong. This web of relationships gives the show many different dynamics to explore and keeps it from feeling repetitive. American Dad's ensemble approach also means that when one character's stories start to feel repetitive, the show can shift focus to others. If Stan's paranoia plots are getting stale, the show can do more Francine episodes, or Steve episodes, or Roger episodes. The ensemble structure provides built-in variety that helps the show avoid becoming predictable or boring. The writers have multiple characters they can use to keep things fresh and explore new territory. This flexibility becomes more important as shows run for many seasons and need to stay interesting. The show also brings in supporting characters who become part of the extended ensemble over time. Characters like Jeff Fisher, who marries Haley, become regulars who get their own development and storylines. Jeff isn't just Haley's husband, but a character in his own right, with his own personality and role in the family dynamic. Recurring characters at Stan's work or in the neighborhood appear often enough to feel like part of the world. Characters like Principal Lewis, Snot, Toshi, and Barry become familiar presences who contribute to the show's sense of having a lived-in world. The show builds an ensemble that extends beyond the core family, creating a sense of community and giving writers even more characters to work with when they need them. Family Guy started with an ensemble structure similar to American Dad's. Early seasons gave attention to different family members and explored their relationships with each other. Lois had episodes about her wealthy family and her past as a wild youth before marriage, revealing that she had an interesting life and personality before becoming Peter's wife. Meg had episodes about trying to fit in at school and dealing with being unpopular, treating her as a real character with real problems rather than just a punching bag. Chris had episodes about his artistic talents and his struggles with adolescence and with learning difficulties. Stewie had elaborate plots about world domination that were central to many early episodes. Brian had episodes about writing and dating that explored who he was. The show felt more balanced in how it used its characters and more interested in developing all of them. Over time, Family Guy shifted to focus much more heavily on Peter, with Brian as a secondary focus. Peter now dominates most episodes, with other family members appearing mainly to react to whatever he's doing. The show has become about Peter's adventures, with other characters reduced to supporting roles. Lois exists primarily to be Peter's wife and to disapprove of his schemes before eventually going along with them. Meg exists to be mocked by the family in ways that have grown increasingly cruel and uncomfortable. Chris exists to be dumb and occasionally do gross things without much development. Stewie's plots have shrunk dramatically from the elaborate world domination schemes of early seasons to mostly just being Brian's friend. The ensemble has collapsed into a show about Peter doing stupid things with other characters as background. This shift toward Peter domination has several negative effects. The show becomes more repetitive because the same character does the same types of things every episode. Peter's stupidity and selfishness can only generate so many different plots before they start feeling familiar. Episodes blend together because they follow the same basic pattern of Peter doing something dumb. The other characters atrophy from lack of use and development. When characters only exist to react to Peter, they stop having their own personalities and desires. They become props in Peter's stories rather than characters with their own stories, which makes the show less interesting because there's less variety in what kinds of episodes can be made. The focus on Peter also limits the types of stories Family Guy can tell. Peter's character allows for certain types of comedy, mainly based on stupidity and inappropriate behavior. The show can't do thoughtful coming-of-age stories, or stories about political conflict, or stories about identity, because Peter isn't suited to those narratives. The narrow focus means the show has fewer storytelling tools and less flexibility. The range of possible episodes becomes limited by Peter's character and his capabilities. Family Guy's treatment of Meg exemplifies how the ensemble has collapsed and how characters have been reduced. Meg started as a character with actual storylines about being unpopular at school and wanting to fit in and be loved. She had hopes and dreams and personality. Over time, she has been reduced to existing only to be abused by the family. Episodes rarely give Meg anything to do except be mocked and treated terribly. When she does get focus, it's usually in episodes about how terrible her life is or how much her family hates her. She isn't treated as a character who can carry interesting stories or who deserves development. She exists only to be the family punching bag, which wastes a potential ensemble member and makes the show meaner and less enjoyable to watch. The treatment of other characters shows similar problems. Lois has lost most of her personality and exists mainly to be Peter's wife. Episodes rarely explore who Lois is or what she wants beyond her relationship with Peter and her role as mother. Chris appears occasionally to do something gross or stupid, yet rarely gets stories focused on him or real development. Even Brian, who receives significant screen time, is mainly used as Peter's sidekick on adventures rather than having his own storylines that explore who he is. The character development that made these people interesting in early seasons has been abandoned in favor of using them as background for Peter's antics. Family Guy occasionally does episodes that focus on characters other than Peter, yet these feel like exceptions rather than the rule. When an episode focuses on Stewie or Brian or Lois, it stands out because it's so unusual for the show to give attention to anyone but Peter. The fact that focusing on other characters feels special shows how far the show has drifted from being an ensemble piece. In American Dad, focusing on different characters is normal and expected. In Family Guy, it has become unusual. The individual focus on Peter also undermines the show's ability to surprise viewers. When you know every episode will be about Peter doing something stupid, the show becomes predictable. You can anticipate the structure before the episode begins. Peter will do something dumb. It will cause problems. He will refuse to acknowledge the problems. Things will get worse and eventually resolve through some arbitrary means. The lack of ensemble variety means the show falls into patterns that become boring over time. American Dad avoids this by constantly shifting which characters are the focus. You never know if the next episode will be a Stan episode, a Francine episode, a Roger episode, or something else. This unpredictability keeps the show feeling fresh even after many seasons. The ensemble approach provides built-in variety that prevents the show from becoming stale. The ensemble structure also allows American Dad to explore different genres and tones depending on which character is the focus. Roger episodes can be completely absurd and surreal. Steve episodes can be sincere coming-of-age stories. Stan episodes can be political satire. Francine episodes can explore identity and marriage. The show can shift between different types of comedy and different emotional tones because it has different characters suited to different types of stories. Family Guy's focus on Peter limits the show to the types of comedy that work with Peter's character. The ensemble versus individual focus also shapes how viewers connect with each show. American Dad lets viewers find different favorite characters and appreciate different aspects of the ensemble. Some viewers might love Roger's chaos, others might relate to Steve's awkwardness, others might enjoy Stan and Francine's marriage dynamics. The variety means different viewers can connect with the show in different ways. Family Guy's focus on Peter means your enjoyment depends heavily on whether you find Peter funny. If you're tired of Peter's antics, there isn't much else for you in most episodes. Before we move on, be sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. The ensemble structure in American Dad and the individual focus in Family Guy also connect to how each show has evolved over its long run and whether the shows have maintained creative vitality or fallen into repetitive patterns. Section 11. Longevity and creative evolution. Both American Dad and Family Guy have been on television for remarkably long stretches. Family Guy premiered in 1999 and is still producing new episodes today, making it one of the longest-running animated shows in television history. American Dad premiered in 2005 and has also continued for nearly 2 decades. The length of time these shows have stayed on the air raises important questions about how shows maintain quality and creativity over such long runs. Looking at how each has evolved reveals very different approaches to longevity and very different levels of success in staying fresh and interesting. Family Guy's evolution over its run shows a pattern of gradual decline in quality that many longtime viewers have noticed and discussed. The show started strong in its first 3 seasons, from 1999 to 2003, establishing its characters and its style of humor. These early seasons are often considered the show's peak by fans and critics. The humor was edgy without being cruel. The characters had depth and consistency. The cutaway gags were used sparingly enough that they enhanced rather than overwhelmed the episodes. The show felt fresh and different from other animated sitcoms of the time. When Family Guy was canceled in 2003 and then revived in 2005 thanks to strong DVD sales and cable reruns, something changed. The show that came back was noticeably different from the one that had been canceled. The characters became more extreme versions of themselves. Peter got dumber and meaner. The cutaway gags increased dramatically in frequency. The stories became thinner and less important. The show started leaning more heavily on shock value and offensive humor. This change happened gradually across seasons 4 through 6, so casual viewers might not have noticed right away, yet fans who compared the post-cancellation episodes to the original 3 seasons could see clear differences. By the time Family Guy reached seasons 7, 8, and 9 in the late 2000s and early 2010s, the decline had become obvious to most viewers. These seasons are often cited as the show's worst period. The characters had become caricatures of themselves. Meg's treatment turned genuinely cruel. Peter's stupidity reached levels that made him seem brain-damaged rather than just dumb. The gross-out humor increased. Episodes focused on shock value and controversial topics without having anything meaningful to say about them. The show felt like it was trying too hard to be edgy and offensive, which made the humor feel forced rather than natural. Family Guy's response to criticism during this period reveals something important about how it approached its own evolution. The show seemed aware that people thought it had declined, yet instead of trying to recapture what made the early seasons work, it doubled down on the elements people complained about. The show became even more reliant on cutaway gags. The humor became even more mean-spirited. The show seemed to embrace its reputation as controversial and offensive, rather than trying to improve the quality of its writing and characterization. In more recent seasons, Family Guy has made some attempts to improve, with mixed results. The show has slightly reduced the frequency of cutaway gags in some episodes. There have been attempts to give characters more development and to tell more coherent stories. Some recent episodes have been better received than those from the worst period in seasons 7 through 9. However, the improvements have been inconsistent. For every episode that shows signs of better writing, there are episodes that fall back into the same problems the show has had for years. The fundamental issue with Family Guy's evolution is that the show never really adapted or changed its approach in meaningful ways. It has been doing essentially the same thing for over 20 years. The reliance on cutaway gags, the focus on Peter, the random pop culture references, and the shock value humor have remained constant even as they've become less effective. The show hasn't evolved so much as it has become a more extreme version of what it always was. This lack of real evolution is why the show feels repetitive and tired to many viewers who have been watching for a long time. American Dad's evolution tells a very different story. The show premiered in 2005 with a clear identity built on post-9/11 political satire. Stan was a paranoid CIA agent dealing with terrorism fears and conservative politics during the Bush administration. The show's satire was timely and relevant to the political moment. As time passed and the political landscape changed, American Dad could have become dated or irrelevant. Many shows tied to specific political moments don't age well once that moment has passed. Instead, American Dad evolved and adapted while preserving its core strengths. The show gradually shifted away from being quite so focused on timely political satire and became more about character-driven comedy and absurdist situations. Stan remained a conservative character, yet his conservatism became less tied to specific political events and more about his personality and his relationships with his family. The show found ways to stay politically relevant without being chained to whatever was in the news that week. This evolution let the show stay fresh while building on its established foundation. Roger's character evolution demonstrates how American Dad has successfully adapted. Roger started as a relatively minor character defined primarily by being an alien living with the Smiths. Over time, he became one of the show's most important characters through the development of his persona system. His ability to adopt different identities and live different lives became a source of endless storytelling possibilities. The show could do completely different types of episodes, depending on which Roger persona was featured. This character evolution gave the show new tools to work with and new directions to explore. American Dad also maintained its quality by preserving what made it good in the first place while still letting itself grow. The show never abandoned its ensemble structure. It never stopped caring about character consistency. It never started relying on cutaway gags to fill time. The pacing stayed measured rather than becoming frenetic. The satire stayed intelligent rather than becoming superficial. The show respected its own foundations while still finding room to experiment and try new things. The move from Fox to TBS in 2014 could have been a disaster, marking the beginning of a decline. When shows change networks, they often lose something essential in the transition. American Dad managed to survive this change and arguably even improved. The move to TBS gave the show more creative freedom and let it push boundaries in ways that might not have been possible on Fox. The animation quality improved. The storytelling became even more ambitious. The show used the transition as an opportunity to evolve rather than as an excuse to decline. American Dad has also shown remarkable consistency and quality across its run. While not every episode is perfect, the show has maintained a high standard compared to most sitcoms that run as long as it has. There's no clear decline period like Family Guy experienced. Later seasons of American Dad are generally considered as good as or better than earlier ones. The show has avoided falling into the trap of becoming repetitive or running out of ideas. This consistency is rare for shows that run for multiple decades. One key difference in how the shows have evolved is how they treat their own history. Family Guy largely ignores its own continuity and history. Episodes from Season 20 don't build on or reference things that happened in Season 5. The show exists in a perpetual present, where nothing that came before really matters. This prevents the show from growing or evolving in meaningful ways because it refuses to acknowledge its own past. American Dad embraces its history and continuity. Later episodes reference earlier ones. Character development from previous seasons carries forward. The show builds on its own foundation rather than constantly resetting. This lets the show evolve naturally because it can draw on everything that has come before. The show's world becomes richer and more detailed over time rather than remaining static. The creative teams behind each show have also evolved differently. Family Guy has had high turnover among its writing staff, with many writers coming and going over the years. This turnover can bring fresh perspectives, yet it can also lead to inconsistency when new writers don't understand what made the show work originally. American Dad has maintained more continuity in its creative team, with several key writers staying with the show for many years. This continuity helps preserve the show's voice and ensures new episodes feel consistent with older ones. Both shows have had to deal with the challenge of staying relevant in a changing television landscape. When Family Guy premiered in 1999, there were relatively few options for animated adult sitcoms. By the 2000s and 2010s, there were dozens of shows competing for the same audience. The rise of streaming services changed how people watch television and what they expected from shows. Both American Dad and Family Guy had to adapt to these changes or risk becoming irrelevant. Family Guy's response has been to stay essentially the same, while occasionally trying to be more controversial or shocking to grab attention. The show seems to believe its brand is strong enough that it doesn't need to change. This has kept the show recognizable and familiar to viewers who have been watching for years. Yet, it has also made the show feel increasingly dated and out of touch with modern comedy sensibilities. American Dad's response has been to quietly improve and evolve without making a big deal about it. The show has adapted its humor and storytelling to stay relevant while remaining true to its core identity. It feels modern and current without chasing trends or trying too hard to be edgy. This approach has earned the show critical respect and attracted new viewers even as it has held onto its existing audience. The different approaches to evolution and longevity reflect different philosophies about what success means for a television show. Family Guy seems to define success as staying on the air and maintaining recognizable brand identity. As long as the show continues to air and generate revenue, it's considered successful regardless of quality. American Dad seems to define success as maintaining creative integrity and producing good episodes. The show cares about quality and about earning respect from critics and thoughtful viewers. Looking at how these shows have evolved reveals that longevity alone isn't necessarily a good thing. Simply staying on the air for many years doesn't mean a show has been successful in any meaningful way beyond commercial success. What matters is whether a show maintains its quality, keeps finding new things to say, and evolves in ways that keep it relevant and interesting. American Dad has achieved this kind of meaningful longevity. Family Guy has achieved commercial longevity without maintaining creative vitality. Before we move on, be sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. After examining all these differences between American Dad and Family Guy across multiple dimensions, we can finally step back and ask what this comparison teaches us about comedy itself and about what makes animated sitcoms work. Section 12. What this comparison teaches about comedy. After examining American Dad and Family Guy across multiple dimensions, including character development, humor style, thematic depth, structure, ensemble focus, and creative evolution, we can draw some important conclusions about what makes comedy work and what allows animated sitcoms to succeed over long periods. The comparison between these two shows reveals fundamental principles about comedy that apply well beyond just these two programs. Understanding these principles helps us appreciate what separates good comedy from mediocre comedy, and what lets some shows maintain quality while others decline. The first major lesson is that character matters more than jokes in sustaining quality comedy. American Dad demonstrates that when you build comedy from character and let characters be consistent and develop over time, the humor has lasting power. Jokes that emerge from who characters are and how they interact stay funny even on repeated viewing because they reveal truth about personality and relationships. When Stan does something paranoid or Roger creates a new persona, the comedy works because we understand these characters and their motivations. Family Guy demonstrates that when comedy is disconnected from character and exists purely as random jokes and references, the humor has diminishing returns. Once you've seen a cutaway gag, there's little reason to watch it again. The joke exists in isolation without building toward anything meaningful. The cutaway might be funny the first time, yet it offers nothing on subsequent viewings because it doesn't connect to character or theme. This principle about character-driven comedy versus joke-driven comedy applies broadly to comedy writing across all mediums. Shows that invest in their characters can tell more varied stories and sustain viewer interest over many seasons. When characters are well developed, they can carry different types of episodes and be put in different situations without feeling repetitive. Shows that rely primarily on joke volume and shock value eventually run out of fresh material and become repetitive. There are only so many cutaway gags you can do before they start feeling familiar. Character gives comedy structure and purpose. Without strong character work, comedy becomes hollow entertainment that doesn't stick with viewers after they finish watching. The second lesson is that respect for characters and audience makes comedy more effective and more sustainable over time. American Dad treats its characters as people who deserve dignity even when they're being ridiculous. This respect lets viewers care about what happens to them and stay emotionally invested in their stories. We laugh at Stan's paranoia while also understanding that his fears come from somewhere real. We laugh at Steve's awkwardness while also rooting for him to find confidence. The show also respects its audience's intelligence by assuming they can follow complex stories and understand nuanced satire. The show doesn't explain its jokes or talk down to viewers. It trusts that the audience can understand what's being satirized and why it matters. Family Guy's increasingly cruel treatment of characters like Meg creates a mean-spirited tone that makes the comedy less enjoyable for many viewers. When an entire family hates one member for no reason, and the show presents this as funny, it requires viewers to take pleasure in cruelty. The show's reliance on obvious jokes and constant pop culture references suggests it doesn't trust its audience to appreciate sophisticated humor. The show assumes viewers need constant stimulation and can't follow stories without frequent interruptions. This lack of respect for the audience becomes tiresome for viewers who want comedy that challenges them rather than merely distracting them. Respect matters in comedy because comedy works best when there's a connection between the show and its viewers. Comedy is a form of communication that requires some level of trust and understanding. When a show seems to have contempt for its characters or its viewers, that contempt poisons the comedy. Viewers can sense when they're being talked down to, or when a show is being cruel rather than funny. The emotional tone matters as much as the jokes themselves. American Dad's success suggests you can have edgy, boundary-pushing comedy while still maintaining fundamental respect for characters and viewers. Family Guy's problem suggests that disrespect eventually undermines comedy, no matter how many jokes you tell or how shocking you try to be. The third lesson involves the difference between satire and parody as approaches to comedy. American Dad's satirical approach gives the show lasting relevance because satire examines real patterns in politics and culture that persist over time. The show comments on fundamental aspects of American identity, government power, political division, and consumer culture that remain meaningful years after episodes air. These aren't topics that go out of date quickly. The show's satire of paranoia and nationalism will stay relevant as long as those attitudes exist in American politics. Family Guy's reliance on pop culture parody makes the show feel dated because references lose their relevance as time passes. Parody depends on specific knowledge of specific cultural moments, which limits its lifespan. A joke referencing a celebrity scandal from 2008 won't mean much to viewers in 2028 who don't remember that scandal. This distinction matters for anyone creating comedy they hope will have lasting value beyond immediate entertainment. Satire that targets real human behavior and institutional patterns will stay relevant as long as those patterns exist. The satire keeps working because the underlying truth it reveals doesn't change. Parody that references specific pop culture moments will only be funny to people who remember those moments. As time passes and cultural memory fades, the parody stops working. Creators who want their comedy to endure should focus on satire that reveals truths about human nature and society, rather than parody that simply references current events or popular culture. The fourth lesson concerns structure and pacing. American Dad demonstrates that traditional three-act structure with clear setup and payoff creates more satisfying comedy than fragmented random humor. When episodes build toward climaxes and resolutions, viewers feel rewarded for their attention. The journey through the episode feels purposeful rather than random. When jokes pay off setups from earlier in the episode, the comedy feels earned and intelligent. The audience appreciates the craft that went into constructing the episode. Family Guy's fragmented structure with constant cutaways prevents this kind of sophisticated comedy from working. The interruptions mean nothing can build properly, which limits what kinds of jokes are possible. You can't have running gags that develop across an episode when the structure constantly jumps away from the main story. Structure matters in comedy because comedy is about timing and rhythm. Good comedy needs space to breathe and needs to build tension before releasing it through laughter. The setup creates anticipation that makes the payoff more satisfying. Constant bombardment with jokes prevents proper rhythm from developing. When jokes come too rapidly, none of them can make a strong impression. American Dad's measured pacing lets individual jokes land with maximum impact because there's space around them. Family Guy's frenetic pacing means jokes blur together without making strong impressions. Creators need to understand that less can be more when it comes to joke density and pacing. Fewer jokes that are well constructed and properly timed will be more effective than a constant stream of jokes with no breathing room. The fifth lesson involves the importance of thematic consistency and depth. American Dad shows that comedy can explore meaningful themes while still being funny. The show examines questions about family, identity, politics, and American culture in ways that give episodes weight beyond pure entertainment. These themes make the show more memorable and more worth discussing. Viewers can talk about what episodes mean and what ideas they explore. Family Guy's lack of consistent themes means episodes are forgotten soon after they air because they don't give viewers anything substantial to think about. The episodes exist purely as entertainment without deeper meaning, which makes them disposable. Thematic depth doesn't make comedy less funny. In fact, comedy with something to say is often more satisfying than comedy that exists purely for laughs. Viewers appreciate when shows respect them enough to engage their minds as well as their sense of humor. Themes give comedy purpose and make individual jokes feel like they're building toward larger ideas. The jokes serve the themes, and the themes give the jokes meaning. Without themes, comedy can feel pointless even when individual jokes work. The laughter feels empty because it isn't connected to anything meaningful. The sixth lesson concerns ensemble versus individual focus in long-running shows. American Dad's ensemble structure provides variety that keeps the show fresh across many seasons. Different characters can carry different types of stories, which prevents the show from becoming repetitive. When one character's stories start to feel familiar, the show can shift focus to others. Family Guy's increasing focus on Peter limits the variety of stories that can be told and makes the show feel stale. Every episode is about Peter doing something stupid, which becomes predictable. For shows that aim to run for many years, developing a full ensemble of characters who can all carry stories is essential for maintaining viewer interest and preventing the show from falling into repetitive patterns. The seventh lesson involves how shows should handle evolution and adaptation over time. American Dad demonstrates that shows can evolve and change while preserving what made them good originally. The show has shifted its focus and its tone over the years while maintaining character consistency, thematic depth, and quality standards. The evolution feels natural rather than forced. Family Guy demonstrates what happens when shows refuse to evolve meaningfully. The show has become increasingly stuck in patterns that no longer work, yet it continues doing the same things because changing would require admitting the current approach has problems. The refusal to evolve makes the show feel increasingly dated and irrelevant. The eighth lesson concerns the relationship between commercial success and creative quality. Family Guy is commercially successful, with high ratings and strong brand recognition, yet its creative quality has declined significantly from its peak. American Dad is less commercially successful than Family Guy, yet maintains higher creative quality. This comparison reveals that commercial success and creative quality aren't the same thing and often don't align. Shows can succeed in business terms while failing artistically. Shows can succeed artistically while having smaller audiences. Both types of success have value, yet they shouldn't be confused with each other. The comparison between American Dad and Family Guy ultimately teaches us that comedy is not just about making people laugh in the moment. Good comedy requires craft, respect, consistency, and purpose. Comedy can be sophisticated and meaningful while still being funny. The best comedy creates characters we care about, explores themes that matter, and builds jokes through structure rather than random chance. American Dad demonstrates these principles in practice. Family Guy demonstrates what happens when comedy abandons these principles in favor of joke volume and shock value. If you enjoyed the video, be sure to subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.